Whew. Oh boy. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Let me get my shit together so that we can do this. What's going on, everyone? Happy Thursday. Apple Music, top 100 albums of all time. I have not seen this list other than the very first two on the list because I had to make sure that everything was configured right for the stream. So, yeah, first and foremost, anyone posting spoilers in the chat, not going to reach me. I'm not going to have the chat really open on this one. If you got something to say, you can hit me in the super chats if you want to support the stream that way. But just please keep the spoilers to yourself. Any mods that are in the chat have my full permission to remove messages that have spoilers or put someone in timeout if they keep doing it again and again, or if they do it more than once, I should say, honestly. Keep that shit to yourself. Some of us have not seen the list yet. I intentionally don't want this spoiled for me so that you can get my real reactions in real time. That's exactly the point of this stream, so yeah, we're going to cut this up into a VOD later. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes here for people to enter before we officially get into the list. If you could do me a huge favor before we get started, hit the like button on the stream. Lets more people know that we're live doing this right now. I'm going to be giving my raw and unfiltered reactions going from number 100 all the way to number 1. And this is a list curated, of course, by Apple Music. I will save the rest for when I do my YouTube spiel intro. We're going to cut this one up into a VOD. I think this should be a good time, maybe a bad time. I really don't know what to expect in terms of Apple Music because for now, at least, I'm a Spotify subscriber. We'll get more into that too, but I've definitely got my issues with streaming platforms in general, but definitely Spotify right now. We'll see if Apple Music can make me want to jump to Team Apple. I don't know. After all this, I feel like I just might be Team YouTube Music. I actually downloaded the YouTube Music app like last week, so maybe, just maybe, I start slowly making the switch over there. I really don't know. It's not my favorite option in terms of UI either, but yeah, I was about to say chat, what do you guys use? But not looking at chat for this one. Sorry. Welcome. If you're just joining us, we're about to get started. Please hit that like button. Lets more people know that we are live doing this right now. We're getting closer to 100 live viewers, so once we get there, we're going to get started. How about that? Does that sound cool? Cool. Let me make sure we've got everything in place. That opening song that we played for the stream was Adrenaline by We Hate You, Please Die. Another good suggestion from YouTube Music, making me want to switch over there. Spotify discontinuing its car thing with no notice, without warning. It's ending at the end of this year. December 4th, I think it was. We got an email today saying, that's it. We're pulling the plug on this $90 piece of hardware that you bought. All right. Let's do it. Let's do the damn thing, and let's do it up. Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John. Today we're going to be reacting to Apple Music's top 100 albums of all time. This is a curated mix, not based on streaming figures. It's Zane Lowe, Maggie Rogers, Nile Rodgers, and other artists like Charlie XCX were pulled and had input into this. So we'll see. There's been a lot of discourse online. So far, I've managed to avoid almost all of it by just staying off of socials, staying off of YouTube, not looking at any reactions. I wanted to give you my raw, unfiltered, honest opinions on this top 100 to see if this out-of-touch streaming service that kind of helped kill off the album is going to do any justice to a list like this. Do we dare? Do we dare enter? So this is our lineup of people that we're looking at. This was the roundtable discussion, the main ones that were kind of getting into the nitty-gritty, helping assemble this. Zane Lowe, I've definitely kind of had more iffy feelings on in the past couple of years, just due to the fact that it feels like he's become one of those interviewers that kisses so much ass, just like everything is the best thing ever. And in a way, maybe that's his job, but it just starts to feel facetious when you're saying every album is their best album ever, or the best album that you've heard all year. You can't have 50 albums that are AOTY. Let's go ahead and flip over to the list itself. Apple Music's best 100 albums of all time. Their definitive list of the greatest albums ever made, assembled with the help of artists and experts. It's a modern love letter to the records that have shaped the world we live and listen in today. And of course, sign up for Apple Music, please. I avoided the top because my wife told me that there were some spoilers up there, so I just scrolled very quickly past that. We're going to go ahead and start with number 100, which is Body Talk by Robin. This is actually a really good record. I was a little bit late on the Robin train, but we're off to a good start here. Why choose between dancing and crying when you can do both? It's honestly not a bad argument for this. Anyone having a problem with Robin, somebody as legendary as an artist like her, is, I don't know, probably at least a little bit out of touch with the modern culture. I feel like this is a nice place to start, but we'll see if that hot streak actually continues on. At 99, we have Hotel California by the Eagles. This is a record that I grew up listening to because, 50 million other people in America alone, my parents had the album on vinyl, and I just remember dancing myself to sleep some nights just with this on in the background, fading off. Hotel California is definitely a classic, but the Eagles, is it unexpected? Of course not. It's a snapshot of 70s excess and the soundtrack to the Come Down. This came out in the late 70s, and to see it making a list like this, definitely no surprise there. You guys probably aren't shocked either, based on what we're seeing. We've got, Robin, the Eagles, so nothing too shocking. Predictions, if I wanted to make some predictions for this list, I feel like if I had to make predictions for Apple Music's top 100 just based on seeing the first two, I feel like it could be a nice balance between some of the more boomer-esque generation music, but also some of the more lavish experimental stuff that defined the post-Y2K era. But at the same time, if I see more than 0 Drake albums on the list, I'm going to be punching the air. Oh man, here we go. All right, let's keep scrolling. Number 98, Astro World by Travis Scott, as we are in the middle of another lawsuit that's trying to be settled by Travis and his legal team. Obviously, the crowd crush at Astro World leaving multiple people dead, including a young child, a devastating situation still going on, of course. And while we obviously cannot entirely fault Travis Scott here, he also, at least in my opinion, didn't do much of anything to prevent this. He knows how crazy the concerts can get, and of course the blame is on the security team, I feel too, just for letting so many people in, rushing the stage. And Astro World as an album hasn't aged that well. I actually revisited this maybe a couple of months ago, and it's good, but all-time worthy? This just kind of feels like a little bit of glazing for a very strange person, that being billionaire Travis Scott and Kylie Jenner. Let's see their reasoning behind this. Buy a ticket and take the ride. Wow, that just feels a little bit even more out of touch. Hold up. This is their reasoning for this. Buy a ticket and take the ride. Astro World by Travis Scott. I really don't feel like this is the way. This doesn't feel like the move to me. Buy a ticket, take the ride, Astro World, the experience. Come and, get inside this crowd crush now. That just, Named after a closed Six Flag, yeah, we know the whole thing. No mention of really anything else. Travis Scott, yeah, I don't know. He feels in a way like he's so indebted to Kanye for being his mentor, his stylist, and just kind of grooming him to be the artist that he became, this crooning, auto-tuned rapper. And while this album, Astro World, is good, like I said, upon revisiting, I just don't feel like it aged as perfectly as some hip hop fans would lead you to believe. And this makes me curious and also a little bit nervous for what other hip hop records are going to make the cut. All right, let's keep scrolling. On to number 97, Rage Against the Machine. This is a great choice. This is an album that I actually picked up recently on vinyl, their classic self-titled debut. This is an album that really started to pave the way for rap rock and rap metal to become a lot more mainstream. Zach De La Rocha, Brad Wilt, and obviously you've got Tom Morello absolutely shredding this. Some of their most classic songs like Killing in the Name are on this album, so absolutely zero complaints from me here. Anger is indeed a gift, but playing shows ever again, that's a gift that we're probably never gonna get from Rage. 96, Lord's Pure Heroin. Wow, this was a defining record of the 2010s for sure. Even if you're not a fan of Lord, this is an album that paved the way for the kind of minimalism that we've seen so much more of in a good way. The combination of electronics, alternative pop, if you want to call it that. Lord was just 16 years old when this record came out. And wise beyond its years is a great description. It's really been used for over a decade to describe it at this point. And pushing Royals, Team, some of the deep cuts that are so good, like Ribs, which became a fan favorite, Buzz Cut Season. This record is immaculate, and possibly only topped by her sophomore effort, Melodrama, which I would love to see here, but I kind of doubt it. I don't know if they're going to do more than one artist per for this entire list. I really don't know. Number 95, Confessions by Usher. This is an album that was so big, so many times multi-platinum. I believe it went diamond in the stateside alone. Confessions as an album is a little bit more like a mixtape, at least in places, but it is such a solid, in a way, groundbreaking, more so for the early 2000s mainstream version of R&B that became so successful, not just for Usher, but really a lot of artists that followed in his footsteps. 94, Untrue by Burial. Unfamiliar with this one, the first unrecognized one to me. Gritty but still gentle, an instant touchstone of UK electronic music released in 2007. This sounds like something that would be worth checking out. Unfamiliar myself, I wish I could look at the chat right now just to see what other people are feeling, but I feel like there's going to be so many people posting spoilers just to be a douche. Why? Why do it? Honestly, this does sound pretty intriguing, to be completely honest. I feel like Burial might be something. I feel like 2007 had some groundbreaking electronic music because if I'm not mistaken, Justice and the Cross album came out that year. Burial, Untrue. Big year, apparently, for electronic turning a new leaf. Turning another new leaf, A Seat at the Table by Solange. This is Beyonce's sister, I believe, younger sister. This was the record that really critically put her on the map and, if you'll allow the pun, gave her a seat at the table. This one took some time to grow on me, but it is a really nice concoction. We got the smoothness, but also a little bit of artistry that I just wouldn't have expected. They're saying museum-worthy art that heals, homing in on the black female experience, especially her own. This is an album that's definitely deserving. At number 93, it's hard to complain. I feel like some people would want this higher, but I feel like that seat might be reserved for Beyonce herself. Going on to number 92, Flower Boy by Tyler, the Creator. My man, my friend. Wow, let me take that again. Moving on to number 92, Flower Boy, or Scumfuck Flower Boy by Tyler, the Creator. Definitely one of his most artistic, potent statements. You could say that Igor was that album, but Flower Boy was the transition to prove that he wasn't just, all gas, no brakes. The man could pull off a track like 911, but then throw in a collab with Kali Uchis, Where This Flower Blooms, that really just, like Apple is saying here, embracing the art of emotional bloodletting and setting rap in a bold new direction. Personally, my favorite of Tyler's is his most recent album as of now, Call Me If You Get Lost. That album is just stacked with bangers, introspection. It's a combination of all of his best works, so it would be great to see that on the list, but if not, Flower Boy is definitely a close runner-up for even me. 'Cause you make my earthquake. Wrong album. 91, the year I was born, 1991. Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1 by George Michael of Wham fame. Okay, we're seeing a little bit of GM on here. That's unexpected, honestly. I've looked through a lot of these top 100 lists, whether it be RYM, Metacritic over the years, and I think this is the first time that I've actually seen it rank in the top 100. The sound of an artist reaching towards something profound and quietly radical. George Michael passed away far too young, an insane talent. A lot of people might only know him for either Careless Whisper or maybe that Christmas song from Wham, Last Christmas. Obviously, two classics for a reason, but it goes way deeper than that. So it's great to actually see this on here. This is an album that I haven't heard in a couple of years, but this makes me want to go back and hear it. So at least 91, my year of birth, if we're going to go by that alone. I'm not too disappointed so far. We move on to number 90. Let's see if I actually stand by that. Back in Black by AC/DC. This, I believe, was this the final album with Bon Scott? Let me see if I'm remembering that right or not. I could be way off on that. AC/DC. I don't listen to them a ton, but, they kind of get a little bit repetitive as it goes. Back in Black. Maybe this was the first. Was this the first album with Brian? Maybe. Personnel. Brian Johnson. Yeah. So Back in Black, first album with Brian Johnson after the passing, of course, of their famous lead singer that died young, Bon Scott. My favorite of the two, if we're picking favorites, is Bon Scott. But this was a hell of a comeback statement to say that, hey, we're not actually messing around at all. Out of Tragedy came one of the biggest, brashest rock albums ever made. Bon Scott died that same year to come back later that year. Not even a full year later. That happened in February. This album came out in July. They already had a new singer in Brian Scott, and not just anybody, somebody that could sing his ass off and do justice to the older tracks as well. Back in Black is a classic. Again, not a huge AC/DC fan, but you're not going to hear much of a complaint from me. 89, wow. Okay, the Fame Monster Deluxe Edition by Lady Gaga. Are we including the actual Fame itself, or is this just the Fame Monster? Before there was Paparazzi, there was Paparazzi. Okay, so with the arrival of the Fame, a star was born. Lady Gaga was living the lifestyle of the rich and famous. I do appreciate this. So it's got the full album, it looks like. Yeah, it's got all of the original tracks from the Fame. In that case, I'm actually super stoked on this because Lady Gaga, some people, not as many anymore, but some people will attempt to write off her artistry as style over substance. In my opinion, to me, it always felt like, how can I phrase this? To me, it always felt like her style was an accent mark on top. You get in the behind the scenes of an ARTV video here. This is me overthinking it. Doing like 5 takes of the exact same thing. That's why I was nervous to try this out in a live setting, but bear with me. To me, it always felt like her style was an accent mark on top of the art that she was putting out into the world. It's like the music videos, the image, the infamous meat dress, all of that. Sure, it was to get eyes on her, but below that was not just some formulaic run-of-the-mill pop song. You listen to Bad Romance, not anybody can just put that out like it's nothing. Not everybody can even pull off Poker Face. And this is an album that combines both of those things, because the famed Monster was initially tacked on as a separate EP, later repackaged and put into this deluxe edition. I'm here for it. Definitely one of the best pop artists of the 21st century. Looking forward to if she finally delivers that new album. And I think the Chromatica Ball thing comes out on HBO Max tonight. Yeah, that's today. There's so much going on this weekend. I can't even keep up. Gotta hydrate. Let me make sure I'm not just streaming to no one. I need to check that from time to time. Nice, John. All right, cool. We're good. Guys, if you're just joining in the stream as we've cracked into the 90s, into the 80s, I should say now, do me a huge favor. Hit the like button. It lets more people know that we're live. Avoid posting spoilers in the chat. Any of the mods that are out there are pulling spoilers, so please don't bother. It's not worth your time. Don't spoil it for those of us like me who haven't seen it. I'm not checking the chat right now for that reason. Moving on to 88. I Put a Spell on You by Nina Simone. An absolute classic. Wow, so far I can't say that I really see. I had a lot of people saying there's so much outrage surrounding this. Twitter's pissed off. What is Twitter not pissed off, though? A singular interpreter at the peak of her powers, shape-shifting across styles. That's a very pretty way of saying that this album is really immaculately detailed. The vocals are both serene and powerful. This is a soothing album for me because this is another one that my parents had on vinyl, and I listened to it growing up on top of this wonky old turntable that we had, and it had a lot of pops and cracks in it, but it really didn't matter because it kind of gave it that much more character and brought out the heart that was truly all over this LP. Moving on to number 87, Massive Attack, Blue Lines. Now, don't come from my throat here, but I will admit to the ones that I have not heard. I've not heard this record. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you know what, let's not sound dumb, from the UK, a pioneering mix of soothing soul and simmering paranoia, as much as UK rap, DJ, and MC Collective, Massive Attack. Wow, they've got a lot going on. So inspired by reggae music of the Caribbean, that's where I actually ended up taking my honeymoon, so we definitely may have heard some Massive Attack. There was a lot of that style of music getting played as we were kind of going island to island. UK rap, DJ, and MC Collective, Massive Attack forged a new aesthetic by mixing remarkable clarity with the paranoid fug of weed smoke. Let's go, 420, baby. Why was this not at 42? Or, you know, if they should have done a full list of the top 500, like Rolling Stone, the cowards. I still have not seen that Rolling Stone list. Maybe, depending on how this one goes, I can actually go back, because any spoilers that I have seen for that, I've forgotten at this point, and it just blurs together in my head. So maybe let me know at some point in the future if you do want to see that. Let's see if I know number 86. The answer is yes. Wow, I was just talking about my honeymoon, and that's kind of crazy because our taxi driver that picked us up from the airport in St. Lucia and drove us to our hotel, which was like an hour and a half away from the airport, was listening to this CD. I swear to God, you can't even make that up. That's so crazy. Mary J. Blige. She was talking about how we talked about music some, and this was one of her favorite artists. So shout out to Rhonda. That was help me, Rhonda. Are we gonna see Beach Boys on the list too? That would be appropriate. My Life, Mary J. Blige, Gospel, Grace, and Grit fuel the queen of hip-hop, soul's soul-bearing masterpiece. This came out in 1994. We're looking at this 30 years later. And this is just such an immaculately detailed, very personal album. It's great that I actually did get a somewhat recent listen in, unintentionally perhaps, but just in that taxi ride, I was listening to this and I was like, this has aged incredibly well. Wow. What are the odds? That's crazy. All right, it looks, I can see out of the corner, you can't see it. I can see out of the corner, the little preview. It looks like Golden Hour is up next. Yes. Apple Music, give Casey Musgrave her flowers, please, because she deserves them and then some. Golden Hour is her defining masterpiece. It's a country pop, very lush hybrid. It's very open-minded. The world building on this is just next level. It feels so at peace, and it's unfortunate to look back with the hindsight that this relationship that it was written about, it faltered, it came to a close. But sometimes the chapter that you're living in is exactly where you need to be, what you need to write. And if it was true to you in that moment, then it's true forever, even if things changed later on. What's that generic quote? You know, they say the best thing about a photograph is that it never changes, even if the people in it do. This really captures that glowing aura of being in love and just feeling at peace with the world around you. They describe it as ethereal country, and I couldn't have said it better myself. This was an album that surprised me. I was already a Casey Musgraves fan because of Same Trailer, Different Park and pageant material, but this one transcended country. It became something else entirely, and that's a masterpiece. I probably would have put it a little higher personally, but, you know, I'm not Zane Lowe. I wonder if Zane's votes counted like 3 times the amount of like the other artists. It's like Maggie Rogers, all right, you get 1 vote. Nile Rodgers, you get 1 vote. Charlie XCX, you get a half vote. Zane, we're going to multiply every vote you give by 3. Number 84, Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg. Of course, another rap classic here. This came out in the early 90s, right as really the West Coast hip-hop movement was gaining a lot of traction in the mainstream. It's one of hip-hop's most enduring characters that brings the hangover. This was Snoop Dogg way before this generation knew him for showing up in commercials and just doing features for pretty much anyone that would toss something his way. I mean, a lot of people were joking that, like, on the Tupac AI diss track that featured Snoop Dogg that Drake released, that Snoop spit on it without remembering because he was too fucking stoned. This was long before that. This came out in the early 90s and is definitely reminiscent of his more aggro style. I really love his flows, his smooth-ass, buttery voice cutting through some of these beats. It's a record that just with time has gotten better because it reminds you of a time before hip-hop's glamorization. Shout out Dr. Dre, of course, working on this one. 83, Patti Smith, Horses. This is a record that admittedly I've only heard singles from, or else a selection of songs. I've seen this album cover so many times. I have recognized people talking about this, critically acclaiming, praising it, but I've never actually taken a full listen. The High Priestess of Punk's debut seamlessly mixed with traditionalism, with radical... Wow, I'm going to have to take that again. The High Priestess of Punk's debut seamlessly mixed traditionalism with radicalism. So this was an effort that sounds like it was very important to its time. It's hard for me to really say all that much about dismissing it as being on the list or really saying it belongs here because I haven't heard it. But with the importance that I've seen people assign it to, not just Apple Music, but other people that I definitely go to, respect, trust their voice in the world of music, this definitely feels pretty spot on. Welcome, guys. If you're just joining us, still going through the Apple Music Top 100, hit the like button on the stream if you haven't already. let's keep moving on. Up next, you can find us in the club. That's right. Get Rich or Die Trying. This is 50's magnum opus. This makes a lot of sense, I guess. I do feel that certain tracks and certain skits on the record are maybe aging a little bit more poorly than some of the other bangers, but it's not really outshined by those moments. It's an album from an era of hip hop where really every release you could expect it to be over an hour long easily. And I think that some records suffered because of the way they were padded out in terms of their length. A lot of them just simply did not need to be that long. But that to say, 50 Cent actually didn't really fall victim to that all that much. This is an album that just saw him so hungry, so thirsty, so ready to take over and conquer the game that nothing could get in his way. It's an album that I'm sure even if you don't recognize, like, oh, that's a 50 Cent song, you've heard it. You've heard snippets from it. You've heard it played at sporting events, boxing events, at NFL games, and 50 Cent, of course, being a highlight of one of the recent halftime shows, coming out upside down. Defying logic in modern medicine, a rap supervillain with an ear for a hook rises. Yeah, there's a lot of collabs on this record, and he learned, I think, a lot from some of his companions like Dr. Dre, Eminem, a lot of contemporaries of that era. But 50 ascended because of how willing he was. 50 ascended because of how willing he was to be in your face with what he stood for. He wasn't going to take shit from anyone, and Get Rich or Die Trying is living proof of that. Scrolling on to number 81, After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. My mother-in-law would be praising hallelujah right now. After the Gold Rush is one of Neil's classics, Harvest Moon being another one of my personal favorites, but this is just a record that really, kind of like they're saying, had a sense of melancholic despair under it. It was acoustic rock, but it built more than that. It stood for more than that, too. After the Gold Rush is probably the first multi-platinum album to be recorded in someone's basement. So really, is Neil Young, is he bedroom pop? Should we reclassify this? Neil Young is my favorite bedroom pop artist. Everyone knows it. Cracking at number 80, well, speak of the devil, we were just talking about a couple of albums up. There was Get Rich or Die Trying. Well, here's one of his contemporaries from the era, the Marshall Mathers LP. This is definitely, at least to most fans of Eminem, I would say, at least top 3. For me, this is his defining masterpiece. This album is scary at times. It's terrifying in the sense that you can really see that split persona between Slim Shady, what's him, what is Marshall Mathers. There's definitely some battles going on there. Tracks like Kim, I would not recommend listening to if you're not in a good state or if you've experienced some form of trauma or abuse yourself. This album really goes for the throat. It's relentless. Whew. Looking back on just how raw the album cover even is, it really screams out about how just gritty and unabashed and unapologetic Eminem was. Provocative, catchy, and engineered to piss off the world. This was something that I experienced firsthand because growing up in a Christian environment, going to church and stuff, I remember there was a kid one week that showed up with the Slim Shady haircut. He had bleached his hair. We were in like 2nd or 3rd grade and he was already on that train and he's like, yo, you heard Purple Pills? And I was like, in my little button up and my khaki shorts tucked in. What? Purple Pills? What are those? Oh my God. Good memories, man. Good memories. It's going to be really interesting. This is so weird for me being live right now, knowing that I'm talking to a camera and I'm not looking at the chat. It's in my head, but let me check Discord real quick just in case any of the mods have said anything. All right, I think we're good. Please let me know if reach out if anything gets crazy or I'm suddenly not live anymore or whatever. Keep running up those likes on the stream, guys. We're closing in on 100 likes. I appreciate all of you watching. It looks like we got close to 175 watching right now. Appreciate you guys hanging out on this, I almost said Wednesday, Thursday afternoon. Let's move into the 70s. Let's see if they go for the easy bait on this, right? Like, we're moving into the 70s. Are we going to take a 70s album? No. They went a very, very, very different direction. This is a 2019 record, Norman fucking Rockwell by Lana Del Rey, an artist that I have never understood the full appeal of. That being said, if I were to put an asterisk on this, Norman fucking Rockwell is her best album, easily. Lana is the queen of sad pop, morose melancholy, and a lot of the glamorization that I feel she does of, like, I don't know if abusive or submissive relationships, it comes across that way. Not saying that's always the intention, but so much of her music is generally incredibly drab and colorless, but this actually injected a little bit more life. This was before her producer, and a huge producer in the game right now, Jack Antonoff, had fully kind of fallen off his game and succumbed to what the artist wants instead of pushing them towards a more grand statement. I'm looking directly at you, Taylor Swift. I think Lana Del Rey was one of the last ones that brought out a genuine concoction with that pairing. She paints with sincerity and satire and challenges you to spot the difference. We play in a game of Where's Waldo? I feel like that's a pretty way of saying that this is another album in her catalog, but the difference this time is that it felt like she meant it. A lot of her stuff, I just don't feel that way. Can I zoom this out just a hair? There. I think that works a little bit better, so we can actually get the full album cover and the number in. That works. Gotta stay hydrated. Let me grab a water jug real quick. Clearly, I am planning for things to get a little bit crazy here. Like, as we move into, like, the top 75, the top 50, I think I'm going to need some additional hydration. And just in case that's not enough, we're going to pump in the electrolytes, too. Sheesh. '78. Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road, Elton John. I'll always have fond memories, not just of Elton John at large, but specifically this record. My parents would always tell me this story. I'm so surprised that they did this because they were like very conservative, Southern Baptist type of people, but they went to see Elton John twice live in concert, and they would always rave about this album in particular. At least my mom would. And I really do feel that it's a special place in his own discography. There's so many records that both him and his co-writer, his partner, Bernie Taupin, put together and assembled. But Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is iconic for a different reason, because it really was, like they're saying, a snapshot of everything that they did well together. The instrumentation took a bit of a sidestep. It went in a little bit more experimental, dare I say, direction. And for Sir Elton John, gotta salute ya. That is a classic. Some of these, I just want to actually see what they're saying about the double LP, Yellow Brick Road, Cemented. This is critical and commercial peak. I guess that makes sense, though. It's fitting that for an album, I feel like, a lot of people might say, oh, I want to pick up the Diamonds package, his greatest hits, and just focus on those. But Sir Elton John definitely put out some full album experiences that are not to be missed. 77, Like a Prayer by Madonna. Wow. Okay. Yeah, this is an excellent record. This was late 80s. This was something that was another reinvention of an artist that did so much reinventing within the world of pop. I believe this was 89. I may be totally mistaken on that. But obviously we had Like a Virgin. Then Like a Prayer comes out. It's got these choirs and cathedrals and a lot of people pissed off for a lot of different reasons, including the Catholic Church. I'm here for it, man, because this is absolutely aces. I'm a big pop guy when it's done right. Synth pop, disco pop, whatever you might want to call, not necessarily this record, but just referring to pop in general. Like a Prayer is definitely a blessing. It feels kind of like a kiss from the heavens in the sense that Madonna was at the peak commercially, on top of her game, on top of the world, but she didn't use that as an excuse to just coast by on the hype that she'd already built with like her self-titled album and Like a Prayer. 76 is a Bad Bunny record. Oh man. Oh, who would have guessed? Was he not one of the people pulled for this? Hold on. I think Bad Bunny. Who did this? Who was one of the people pulled? If it wasn't him, okay, never mind. I'm thinking of J Balvin. Apologies. I was about to say, Bad Bunny, you just voted for yourself. I can't say that I've heard this full album, so it's going to be hard for me to comment very much, but Bad Bunny on a list of the greatest albums ever made just feels kind of ironic because it's come out at a time when albums feel more like playlists, and the tracks that I have heard from Un Vero Senti are just not great. Maybe it's a personal thing. I just can't stand the way that he approaches his tracks. He feels very chaotic, bouncing between different flows and singing and the gross amounts of auto-tune. Again, this is an artist that I definitely already have a disdain for, so it's not really gonna mean much to me when you're saying, oh, a groundbreaking superstar. And I'm like, him? We talking about Bad Bunny? Him? You sure? Groundbreaking superstar. That's like, I at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Peso Pluma shows up. Another person where I'm just like, huh? There's better stuff, even from the reggaeton scene, guys. Like, come on. Top 75 hype. At 75, Super Duper Fly, Missy Elliott. This is her magnum opus, I guess you could say. This is an album that, for Missy, came out when the block was hot for her. This was, what, late 90s? By 1997, yeah, she was working with Timbaland. I wanted to make sure I was thinking of the right record. This is a time and place in music that I don't feel could ever be replicated ever again. The late 2000s, the late 90s into the 2000s, Timbaland was that producer, the go-to. He was working from everyone from Aaliyah to Justin Timberlake, and of course, Missy Elliott. She's not to be underestimated. Just because she hasn't dropped in so long, that doesn't mean that she didn't have this flaming hot career where she put out so many bangers, including some albums that took some missteps, really didn't play to her entire strengths, at least not for the entire project. Super Duper Fly is pretty much stacked top to bottom. An avant-garde rap hero and a revolutionary producer team up for a radical, ecstatic debut. I forgot that this was her debut album and debut single. The Rain, Super Duper Fly, on this album thrust her into instant stardom. It was just how off-kilter it felt, I think, and just the dance routines behind it as well, pushing the narrative even further. Missy Elliott is that rapper. Why you keep zooming out on me like that, Apple? I zoomed it out already. You're going to do it again, aren't you? Does that look right to you guys? Super Duper Fly, Missy Elliott. Yeah, I definitely remember when Missy Elliott dropped the Marshall Mathers LP. Apple, fix your shit. You're gonna make me scroll through this shit again. All right. 74, The Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails. Our first taste of what I guess we could call industrial metal or metal at large. This, many of you might know, is one of my favorite albums of all time, one of my favorite concept albums of all time. Trent Reznor took his time crafting this because it came out about 5 years after their debut, Pretty Hate Machine. By the time that this released, he was in a devastatingly low point in his life and his mental health, and this record reflects that in so many different ways. It is obtuse, it's aggressive, it is jaded, it's nihilistic, but the animalistic undertones cannot be overstated in just how effective and visceral and brutal the entire package is, from Big Man with a Gun to the instantly iconic and still remembered and revered to this day, Closer. This is an album that never misses, despite constantly swinging for the fence. Can't say enough good things. Can't glaze it hard enough. I know we're only at 74, but I'm not mad yet. Tell me when I'm supposed to get mad. Maybe I should do that with a close-up. Yeah, you got that behind the scenes ARTV. Yeah, we turning this into a video. I know we're only at 74, but I'm not mad yet. Tell me when I'm supposed to get mad, okay? 73. Okay, some Steely Dan on here. Steely Dan are a band that I've unfortunately never had much love for. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to all of the Steely Dan fans out there that are already punching the air at any sort of sentiment that they're not the second coming of Christ. But Steely Dan, I might have to give this another listen someday. This is Aja, one of their most remembered and revered albums. At their most direct, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker delivered a masterpiece full of tragic romanticism. That sounds intriguing, but just based on my distant memory of this, I don't have the fondest recollection. But personal taste aside, I can appreciate it being here, I guess. At least it's not all just like, at least so far, it doesn't all just feel like, I don't know, the most hyped ones ever. I've seen a few choices like Steely Dan, George Michael, even Missy Elliott that I've not seen appear on a lot of the top 100 lists that I've looked at. So I at least have to give a cheers to that. I severely underestimated how much talking I would be doing in this. Shall we keep moving on? At number 72, wow, that is recent. That's super recent to be on a list like this. SOS by SZA. If anything, I would have absolutely gone for Control and would have liked to have seen that, because that is an album that's, about 50 minutes long? It feels tight, compacted away, but still effervescent. It allowed the R&B and the smoothness of SZA's voice to shine. Not that SOS doesn't, but I could probably trim off like 25 minutes from this record and I wouldn't miss it. Not to say that it's way too bloated, but it's definitely bloated and one of the top 100 of all time. This just came out at the end of 2022. This definitely feels like it's reaching more than the diving board on the album cover. A majestic, raw nerve that set the bar for modern R&B. It's just too soon to say that. It's too soon to say that it set the bar for modern R&B because we haven't lived it yet. That's just what I was talking about. I was just giving you credit, Apple Music, for not buying into the hype culture. I didn't see anything that was like, okay, instantly, other than maybe Bad Bunny. It was just like, I don't know. This one feels like we haven't experienced the cultural reset entirely yet. Has she been influential? Incredibly. But I would say that Control was maybe even a bigger part of that. See, at least Control gets mentioned here, but it's a 14-track project. This one has how many songs? Let's keep scrolling. 23. So that's 9 more songs than were on her debut, and I just feel like it's, again, a bit of a reach. do 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 do. Cool record for sure, but again, for me, I don't know. It's kind of like, if I had to be honest, it's probably like a 3.5 out of 5, you know? A lot of great shit in there. I was just listening to Snooze last night. That's on that record, right? All right. 71. Trans Europe Express by Kraftwerk. Okay, so we're getting into the electronic territory. Rubs hands together as if he's an expert and aficionado on the genre, which he's not whatsoever. But Kraftwerk are a name that I am absolutely familiar with. This record in particular is not necessarily ringing a bell, but this German group combined electronic experimentation with futurist philosophy. I do dig a lot of the music from that 60s, 70s overseas experience. I lean more towards an act like Tangerine Dream that are still around to this day. Kraftwerk, incredibly detailed and vivid and just all-encompassing in a way. From the music that I am familiar with from this record, let's take a look at the track list. Europe Endless, Hall of Mirrors. Yeah, I definitely recognize at least a handful of these, Metal on Metal as well. These are some tracks that can run on for a longer amount of time, but it doesn't feel like it because the world is so fully realized. It's a record, or should I say a collective of people that understood the common goal, that being out-of-the-box expression. Number 70, NWA, straight out of Compton. Finally, my shout out has arrived. That's right, John Compton up in this bitch. I have actually been to Compton, California before, but it was not the warm reception that I was hoping for. NWA, straight out of Compton. This is Ice Cube, Easy-A. NWA, straight out of Compton. This is the collective that combined rappers like Eazy-E and, of course, Ice Cube, among others, for a classic late 80s album that started putting hip-hop on the map. We've already seen some very influential rap albums, but this one in particular struck a chord so heavily because of the way that it balanced out everyday life with some of the more difficult issues in society, especially face. Wow, I can't talk today. Let's take that from the top again, just for the sake of the VOD. NWA's Straight Outta Compton is one of those albums that combined a lot of different mentalities. It was able to get by on some of the societal issues and some of the rhyme schemes that you might have expected from early hip-hop, but it also combined things that were a little bit more out of pocket, I suppose you could say, talking about everyday life and making it more apparent at what the struggle of black youth was at the time, what it meant to be black, what it meant to grow up in a place where not all of these things were afforded to you, to the people that were kind of left behind and forgotten about, especially by governments, and reduced to a certain part of town or a certain hood, a certain area. And NWA did such a fantastic job at not making it about a pity party or anything like that. It was more so, this is what we're doing to respond it, and if you don't like it, then fuck the police. Oh, clicked off entirely, my bad. We're about to get it. We're about to enter the 60s, and up to this point, there's been a few complaints. There's definitely been a few that I don't know, feeling a bit more conflicted on, you know? Like the Bad Bunny appearance. We just had, SOS by SZA, which is a really good album. Just, it feels a bit too soon. I don't know. I don't know how I'm feeling. I feel like we haven't seen a ton of rock representation. We did get Nine Inch Nails, some Steely Dan, but I am hoping to see a little bit more from the world of, I don't know, maybe hard rock, metal. Obviously AC/DC was in there too, but let's keep going and see what Apple has up their sleeves. 69, come on, 69 God. What do we got? Master of Puppets by Metallica. Yeah, that makes sense. Nobody's really gonna be like throwing up their hands in complete and utter confusion over this one. It's one of the metal band's most iconic and memorable albums. This released in the late 80s. This was before the Black Album even. And it brought a degree of tenacity but also versatility to the thrash metal genre that just a lot of people, especially not bands that were getting attention, they weren't thinking that far ahead. They were thinking encapsulated in those moments in time and putting out music that serviced everyone then, not necessarily thinking if it would still land 30, 40, 50 years in the future. And at 69, Master of Puppets is proving that they've stuck around, that they made their mark for a reason. Even older albums of theirs, like Ride the Lightning, are still pretty heavily well loved. And while Metallica are one of those bands that, especially post Black Album, I tend to roll my eyes at a little bit more, just because of how devoid of depth James Hetfield has become with his lyric writing, and the music has felt a lot more stale, like it's not really trying as hard to be anything different. Of course, maybe they've earned those stripes, but Master of Puppets, man, this is an album that will speak to really any fan beyond just the realm of metal. It captured audiences all over again with appearances in the Netflix series Stranger Things. I almost said Stranger Danger. Metallica's after-school PSA, Stranger of Danger. Don't play with puppets, kids. 68. It's like the music gods were listening to me. I'm over here complaining about a lack of rock on the list, and back to back we get Master of Puppets, and now Is This It? That's not the original album cover there, Apple Music. I believe I'm looking at the censored version. Where's the hand on the butt with the all-white background? Here. Let's show you what Apple Music is too scared to show. Album cover. Do, 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 do. Oh, Jesus Christ, Google. Google Images suck so much ass these days, dude. Speaking of ass. Could somebody just show me the actual album cover? That would be fantastic. Huh. Can I show that on stream? We're about to find out. There you go. There's the original album cover. Huh, what's going on, Apple? Too afraid? Y'all too afraid, Zane? You afraid of what the people are gonna think? Yeah, that's what I thought. Is This It is the debut album by The Strokes, and if I could rant and rave and praise this all day, I probably would. This is a defining record for so many people like myself that saw alternative and rock and this idea of like a garage rock revival and latched onto that music so early in our lives. I think that it became so important just because it seemed kind of lackadaisy, carefree in a way, but the riveting instrumental work and the detailed bass and guitar and just the way that they all came together, it's stylish new garage, as Apple is describing it, and for the New York scene that was really thriving with like the post-punk revival, other bands like Interpol, and then you've got the Strokes and the White Stripes holding it down for more of this garage rock revival. They were able to combine those initiatives and just broadcast Julian Casablancas and Albert Hammond Jr., Nick Valenci, really this entire band, to show how incredibly detailed, but also just laid back they could be and make it sound incredible. Didn't this come out right around 9/11? I'm pretty sure it did. I'm pretty sure. Is this it? Let's see the release date for this. Was it 9/11 or was it like right after it? Is this it? Is This It by The Strokes? No, it came out July 30th. Okay, so a little bit before it. And I guess they ended up cutting on some of the later repressings that came out later. They ended up cutting New York City Cops because, 9/11. Ah, shit. Here we go again. Hang tight, guys. Changing the camera battery. There we go. Go. Let's keep it rolling into 67. Dummy by Portishead. Wow, I just listened to this album, I swear, for the first time this year in 2024. I know this came out in the 90s, but I was so late, it's not even funny. Let's see when Dummy actually released. Dummy, Portishead, 1994. So 30 years later, I finally got around to listening to this album. And, one of the things that honestly inspired me to check out more Portishead in general was Beth Gibbons appearing on the track Mother I Sober, Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale, and the Big Steppers. This had been on my list of albums that I needed to / wanted to listen to for the longest time. And the hype did not disappoint. This is definitely a breathtaking listen that borders on trip hop, a little bit of that glitchy style, but it's also so comforting. It's oddly comforting. It can be unnerving at times with the way everything is packaged and presented, but even if it doesn't immediately grab you and it doesn't make you focus up, make sure that you're giving it a distraction-free listen, because this is an album that through and through, top to bottom, deserves that because of how important and potent it can all feel. We had an idea to be strong with our ideas about what we did and didn't want to do. I think that was kind of a common theme of the early 90s, because not to just shout off a band that's probably not going to make the list that also released an album that was huge in 1994, Dookie by Green Day. They talked about how they wanted this to be bigger than themselves, about how they didn't want to back down on what they wanted to do, and about how this would be perceived in the future. So that's definitely a common theme that's connecting most of, if not a lot of the albums that we've seen on this Apple Music list, is the sense that they have aged very well. 66, we've got the Smiths. The Queen is dead. Oh, buddy, I got opinions on the Smiths, and you're not going to like it if you're a Smiths fan. Morrissey's voice often sounds like this up and down valley effect thing, like he's trying to have an affectation of being nonchalant, but also very sad, at times morose, but deeper than it actually is. Maybe that's unfair to say, because they carved out a lot of different lanes for themselves and for artists that followed in their footsteps, but this band never did much of anything for me. Even the music. I know some people will be like, at least the music, John. What about the music? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm getting a dial tone over here. Every time that I try, it's like booting up internet with a dial-up connection in the year 2024. Except this was like 1984, and not at all for me. Music to cry with or laugh at, all within the same songs. Yeah, I could say that I've had some laughs at Smith songs. I don't know if it's for the intended reason, but yeah, and that's not just because of how big of a dick Morrissey has become. I was exposed to the Smiths probably for the first time in high school. Oddly enough, Strange Ways Here We Come was my introduction to the band, and if I'm being honest, that's probably my favorite album from them, and I know that probably no one else thinks that. It's fine, I will die on that hill. The Smiths kinda suck. 65, we've got another hip-hop classic. This is De La Soul, finally on streaming now, so Apple Music could include it on their list. 3 feet high and rising. There were so many samples that were classic samples, of course, but samples that didn't initially get cleared for mass consumption, for commercial release. De La Soul, a lot of you might know for some of their work with like Gorillaz and other artists over the years, but this was the late 1980s, 1989 or 1990, I believe. This record comes out, and it's so trippy, so transcendental. At times it can be very focused and very rap heavy, but then it can just get ethereal almost, and that's where the sampling comes in. This is a group that really knew how to spin a record and spin your head at the same time. Genre agnostic. I like that. That's actually, you know what, Apple Music credit where it's due. Whoever wrote this, genre agnostic. I'm just like, I don't believe in that shit. You know what? I'm a bit of a genre atheist. I do believe in genre. Everyone wants to say that genre is dead. It's just that I think that the threshold or the line between genres has gotten a lot more blurred, and that's a good thing. And artists like De La Soul helped pave the way decades ago. I think it's time for a bit of a Gatorade haul. My voice is not holding up as well as I expected it to. Granted, I have already done some filming today. Not my brightest idea, perhaps, to go through an entire top 100, but damn it, I wanted to, and I wanted to get to it before I got spoilers, so that's exactly what we're doing. 64. Okay. I don't know this. Eureka? Badu? Baduism? This came out when? This came out socially conscious, free-flowing hip-hop soul that embodied a cultural shift. So this came out in 1997? Okay. I unfortunately have not heard this record. I'll look back at the chat later to see if anyone's recommending a listen. I'm sure. I don't remember even hearing of this album, if I'm honest. Rimshot intro, let's go. Apple Tree, freestyle, okay. Rimshot intro and a rimshot outro. Dude, that's hard as fuck, especially with this picture above it. Rimshot outro, rimshot intro. Wait, hold up. Did I just notice something that we can just keep scrolling and we could do it this way? Ha! Wow, we could do it. Maybe I'll look at the chat for a second. What do you think? Do we like the slow reveal or do we like the scroll reveal? Not that it fucking matters. Not really. I'm going to look and see like some huge spoiler. Okay, the only message I've seen is great. Check her out. On and On is classic. Cool. I will definitely check it out then. The Eagles were at number 99 with Hotel California. Erykah Badu. I like the slow reveal. Okay, cool. I'm cool with that too. I'm seeing votes for both, but we've been doing it this way. Let's keep the slow. Slow Ride. Take it easy. Are we going to see Foghat on the... Where is Foghat on this list? Come on. 63. It's the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Are you experienced? This is a record that has been passed on from generation to generation, and it's a damn good thing that it has, because it's legendary in really every sense of the word. Whether you were anywhere close to being alive for the Woodstock generation, or you were just born, 16 years ago, it really doesn't matter, because classic music like this transcends time. A guitar-driven classic that fused blues with futuristic psychedelia. That's a pretty great way of summing it up here, because, to be honest, as much as Jimi Hendrix is remembered for being an amazing guitarist, what he could do and the sounds that he could get out of his electric guitar, the psychedelic elements are often overlooked in terms of talking about his music and discussing it, because it can get easy to get stuck on the guitar, but it's the sounds that he's using to express those inner feelings, those thoughts. The blues come to life with an entirely different color palette. And this was a debut album. I always forget, this was a debut album. Who puts out something like this is a debut. It's why you're going to see it on any list of the best debuts ever. Sheesh. At 62, they've put Tupac, All Eyes on Me. I hope this is not the AI-generated version. Drake. Cough, 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 cough. The estate won't be taking this one down because All Eyes on Me, featuring tracks like California Love, is, I believe, the final Tupac album, at least in his lifetime, a defining larger-than-life statement from an icon of 90s rap. This, unfortunately, came out not too long before he was shot and killed, and his death in September 1996, this came out, I believe, in 1995, maybe early 1996. It's a 27-track album, but that honestly sounds wrong because it doesn't feel that way. It's an album that really, I feel like, leans on all of his strengths. Everything that was coming out in 90s hip-hop at the time, a lot of it felt focused on gangster rap, and not that this album doesn't lean into that West Coast sound. It's the fact that he brought other vibes entirely. I mean, he's got a track for his mother, he's got a track for the club. There's all kinds of soul statements on this record that showed that he was so much more than just a simple-minded rapper. He had ambitions and achievements way beyond just one specific thing, and it would have been amazing to see how he could continue to not be pigeonholed had he survived. R.I.P. Tupac. That's just insane to think about that we barely even crossed paths at being alive at the same time, but I'm glad that we did. Now let me welcome everybody to the Wild Wild West, a state that's untouchable by alienness. I will always have that sense of reaching a certain standard as far as empathy and compassion towards a record the same way Pac approached music. Kendrick Lamar said that. And of course, Kendrick, listing Tupac as pretty much his idol growing up, it's incredible that he's been able to really carry the torch for that brand of hip-hop, and I appreciate that they included this quote because that's kind of what I was preaching at there. I think that the empathy and the fact that there was something beyond the idea of the gangster rap that never let down its guard. This is an album, All Eyes on Me, that lets down its guard in the most beautiful ways sometimes. At 61, we've got... I'm so bad at pronouncing things. I have done this. I'm sorry. I'm autistic. I'm so bad with pronunciations, okay? Love Deluxe. Love Deluxe. I'm not even going to say it until I've got Google telling me. Shade. Let's see if I got that right. Artist pronunciation. That's the toughest thing about some of these videos sometimes. Shade. There we go. Try that again. At 61, we've got Shade, Love Deluxe. It's just an instantly recognizable album cover, to say the least. But the album I was reintroduced to by one of my close friends. He was going through a huge phase with her music and just like rediscovering a lot of the live performances and passing them off to me. I think that easily this is her defining record for many, many reasons, but for the simple fact that it almost has this dreamlike quality to it. It's an album that flows a bit like a waterfall, and as Apple says it here, it's impossibly rich, an exercise in pure immersion. If soulful and transcendent doesn't describe Love Deluxe, then I don't think those terms are deserving to describe anything, because that's exactly what this encompasses. Several classics under her belt for sure, but this is one that's up there with, hold on, discography, is it No Ordinary Love? Is that the name of an album? Or is that... A compilation. Love Deluxe for sure, though. Like, that's the go-to. Oh, well. If it's not on your radar, put it on your radar, because getting reintroduced a couple of years ago was definitely a blessing for my eardrums. At number 60, oh, there's another one that I'm going to have some unpopular opinions on. Gonna have to drink for this one. Andy Warhol painting a banana. Of course, the Velvet Underground in collaboration with Nico. This is a record that I appreciate for Nico, but you know, as much as we're gonna say R.I.P. Lou Reed here, I don't get it. It's just too abstract and, as it says here, noisy. I remember listening to this record again one night, and my wife was already asleep, and she was like, "Can you please? What am I hearing? Is that the drums? Is that the bass? What am I hearing?" And I'm like, "Sorry, I'm listening to the Velvet Underground, okay?" This is their self-titled record here that is, it came out in 1967. It's admirable for how avant-garde and unafraid it was to tackle all kinds of different things, but it's still going right over my head. I must be too dumb to get it, because this appearing at number 60 on the list just makes me want to get up and just be like, okay, I guess that checks out. Sure, why not? I think it gets so much love already, you know, so much appreciation, so many of the indie critic hipster spheres just fawning over it, that it can take a little bit of blowback from me. And who am I anyways? I'm nobody. I'm just some guy on the internet talking shit about the Velvet Underground in 2024. 59, AM by Arctic Monkeys. Oh, come on, dude. Come on. Oh, it's not based on streaming figures. Look, this is a good album, but assuming that they're not going to be putting multiple albums from any artist on here and are just kind of sticking to a very diverse top 100, which I could appreciate. I like that so far they're not repeating. AM is not the best Arctic Monkeys record, not even close, when albums like Humbug, Favorite Worst Nightmare. I mean, come on, dude. Even their debut maybe would have made more sense over this. Whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not. AM was huge, and it's still on the charts, even in America, definitely in the UK. This was another British invasion over here. These lads out of Sheffield in the UK are just doing a clinic in how to grow without sacrificing what made you great. That's debatable. Again, this is an album that I have had wavering feelings on, kind of like the wavelengths in the album cover. I just never saw this as being their opus, as their defining, legendary, like, all people will always remember this for all time. But I can appreciate that maybe some other people see it that way. Pull up their discography real quick. I've ranked their albums before, and I'm having a hard time remembering where I ranked this one. I mean, obviously at the bottom, I'm going to put The Car, and probably above that, Tranquility Base. Then AM. Wow, they've kind of been going backwards for a while here. Honestly, any of their first 4 albums, I would easily rank above this. And even now at this point, that would probably include Suck It and See, but definitely Humbug, Favorite Worst Nightmare, Whatever People Say I Am. AM is very mainstream in a lot of its ambitions, and some of the songs can be frustratingly similar in a way. They definitely thought outside of the box on tracks like Knee Socks compared to, say, Number One Party Anthem or Are You Mine? But with all of the question mark singles, Are You Mine? Why'd you only call me when you're high? Do I want to know? Damn, Arctic Monkeys. Giving me the second degree over here with all the questioning. Really good album, but 59, number 59, best of all time. That's certainly a take. Let's keep going to 58. Another British invasion, the Britpop invasion, the takeover. Oasis, what's the story? Morning Glory. I'm glad that it's this album and not, I don't know, even definitely maybe, as great as that debut is, I really feel like they improved on so much of that at this sophomore album that was the opposite of a slump. Now, if we were talking Be Here Now, that would have been entirely a different discussion. Thankfully, they didn't go with Be Here Now or any of the other albums that were very, at best, controversial. The larger-than-life apex of 90s British pop. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. Yep, the classic meme had to get included there to intro this segue into this segment here on What's the Story? Morning Glory. At 58, I can definitely see this making sense. British pop was definitely something that had bands like Blur and Pulp and Oasis battling it out for chart glory, but this is arguably the most, or one of the most important records from that time period. I would also probably throw The Verve's Bittersweet Symphony in there. I think that those are albums that captured that time period in a jar, and it can never be unscrewed ever again. It's a time capsule, a permanent one, but in the best way. These songs feel authentic and larger than life, just huge arena-ready fillers, and there's a reason why so many people still latch onto them to this day. You know, I had a plan that I was going to film something else after this. I think I might be on vocal rest for a bit. Perhaps we'll try and move a little faster. Some of this, I'm sure, will get cut out in the VOD anyways. Some of this, he said, knowing that 80% of it will get cut down. 57, another record that... Oh, wait, no, I have heard this one. I was about to say, never mind, I have heard Voodoo. I have not heard D'Angelo's entire discography, but... this is one that combined a lot of different styles. I actually remember checking this out whenever the Comeback album came out. When was that? Like the late 2010s? Voodoo came out sometime in the 80s or 90s, was it? It doesn't even say on here. Thanks guys. It would really be helpful if you could tell me when it came out. Over to Wikipedia we go, the #1 Apple Music competitor. Wikipedia, launch a music service when? The heart of the 90s. I do appreciate that it at least says that, but like, what year? No, see? That's not even right. It came out in 2000. Okay. The heart of the 90s neo-soul movement and a gumbo of black innovation. Voodoo by D'Angelo was a record that I was kind of reintroduced to whenever I discovered the Comeback album. D'Angelo, there was so much hype between Black Messiah whenever that released in the 2010s. And Voodoo became an album that I was kind of, I don't know, discovering at a weird time in my life, but I saw the hype and the appeal almost instantly. It's a sexy album in many ways, but it also kind of is able to bring these social tensions to the surface. It floats the ideas and asks a lot of the right questions over something that could be buttery smooth. Good shit. Definitely a recommend. I was almost afraid that I hadn't heard that one, but shout out past John. Thank you. Thank you. We're almost halfway. At 56, we've got The Cure with Disintegration. If it had been really any of their other albums, I think some people would have rioted, especially if one of those records had been like Wish. Me, on the other hand, I might have been like, you know what, Underdog, let it take the top, pun intended. But with Disintegration, it just strikes such a chord. It's been with audiences since 1989, but the reason why it's still finding new people and new voices and new people to like keep passing that on to the next generation is just because of how well structured the entire track listing is. Not too many records are manicured to this degree where it feels like every time you listen, it's a different experience. You're able to take something else from it. You're gleaming like maybe another nugget of wisdom or part of the instrumental or something in the background that you just didn't get that first 10 times around, those first 100 times around. But it's like a show or a movie that keeps giving with some of those Easter eggs. At 55, we have Rihanna with Anti or Anti, however you want to say it. Up the ante, down the ante. No, not so much. I don't know. This is an album that I have conflicted feelings on because Rihanna was never really an album artist. I think most people can recognize that. She was definitely putting out albums almost yearly there. Actually, definitely yearly there for a while. Talk That Talk and, Good Girl Gone Bad. There were albums constantly coming out, but it was the singles that really transformed the game for her. This was the first album, maybe, or one of her first records, that actually put the idea of Rihanna being more of an albums artist out there. And it does a good job in that sense. I just feel like it gets more praise than maybe it deserves. Not that it doesn't deserve recognition, but with a lot of these songs being a little bit stylistically all over the place, it certainly showcases her ability to be, very varied and have songs like Love on the Brain, To Kiss It Better, to a collab Consideration with SZA. That was early on in SZA's career too. This came out in like 2016 and really took over and dominated the culture for a while. So I can see it being more culturally important than it actually is like one of the top 100 albums ever made. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that one. I do and I don't get it. I do and I don't. With 3 additional songs. It's a bit confusing, I'm sure, putting a list like this together, too, with all the deluxe editions, because I always have the personal rule of, I don't review deluxe, right? That's just always been, a straightforward, no matter how much somebody, adds onto or changes the track list with an altered version of it and re-releases the album, 5 times, like in Stick Season by Noah Kahan. Come on, dude. How many times are we going to get that album? But this says deluxe, but I don't know if it's the actual deluxe that they're factoring in here. It's just, it's hard to tell. And it's hard to say if it really matters all that much or not. I could see an argument for both ways. At 54, we have A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. This is not something that I'm incredibly familiar with, but definitely deserving of a placement on the list. Number 54, this came out in the 1960s, spiritual jazz's founding document. This was something with a conscience behind it, something that felt like it was trying to do more than just convey only the music to the listener. There was something of substance that clearly stuck around to become generational. 53, Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. This is an interesting pick for the Stones. Not that it's not one of their classic albums, but I might have expected something a little bit different, maybe Sticky Fingers? Exile on Main Street. At number 53, the Stones' shambolic, decadent mystique is in its ultimate form. Exile on Main Street is the greatest rock and roll record of all time. That is a bold statement, but that was from a member of the Black Crowes. Just some south of France band in a mansion being unimaginably beautiful and decadent, but it's what's going on in there that you can't hear. Looking over the track list just to remember what all is on here. Ventilator Blues. Yeah, definitely some classic ones on there. I've just never been the biggest Stones guy. In that argument, the Beatles are the Stones. It's always easily the Beatles for me. But I'm also not a Rolling Stones hater. I think that Mick Jagger has an undeniable swagger, stage presence, and a truly iconic band behind him. Rest in peace, Charlie. Rest in peace, some of the other members that have passed on. And Keith Richards, obviously an incredible guitarist. I just have a hard time just feeling what I feel like I'm supposed to when I listen. They're putting Guns N' Roses at number 52. They're putting Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, at number 52. There's a metal album for the list. I guess if we counted industrial metal, the tendencies that Nine Inch Nails had on Downward Spiral, we could count that too. Maybe this is the second appearance of official heavier metal on the list. Appetite for Destruction is a very macho, testosterone-driven record that certainly scratches a primal itch. It's the guitar work from Slash. It's the fact that Axl Rose was obviously in his prime vocally. Tracks like the ballad Sweet Child of Mine will never not go ridiculously hard. It's really an album that can get you dancing, headbanging, and maybe even bring a couple of tears to the bro dude's eye. It brought real danger back to rock. It sure did. They even caused a riot in Louisville. Louisville. Real danger. Well, I only listen to music that's got that real danger, okay? I'm talking like Set It Off. I'm talking like Imagine Dragons. I'm talking like rebellious shit. Come on. Sign of the Times by Prince at number 51. There's a sight for sore eyes. Thank you for rolling into the timeline, Prince. This is an album that's long but so worth it. This is an album that I think that for many might not be their favorite from Prince, but I do feel that it's the most admirable in terms of like complete packages. Some people would point to like, oh, where's Purple Rain? And I do see an argument for that, and maybe even a few of the other Prince records from that era actually making the list. But Sign of the Times is so incredibly important beyond just the words or the music or the guitar tones that Prince is able to put out in this extremely sexy, lavish way. It's the full package. It's the attitude. It's the sass. It's the societal commentary that's all bottled up and then put back out with these incredible instrumentals. Halfway point? Halfway point. That means it's time for a quick break for John to reset himself. Woo! Bro's been yapping all day over here. We got to do the re-up on the water. We got to get all kinds of stuff. She got a smile that it seems to me. Welcome to anybody that's just joining us. We're going through Apple Music's top 100 albums of all time. All time. Do me a huge favor if you haven't already, hit the like button on the stream. Helps me out a ton. We're going to be turning this one into a video that comes out probably either on the main channel or the second channel. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. We'll see how the top 50 goes. But either way, we've seen some crazy stuff, but honestly, a lot of great stuff. I can't give them too much flack so far. There's been some albums that I definitely disagreed with, like Rihanna and the newest SZA album appearing, and I don't know, like just a few other albums like Bad Bunny that just left a sour taste in my mouth when seeing them pop up in a top 100 of all time. It's like, I mean, okay. But again, guys, if you haven't noticed, I should repeat for anyone joining, I'm actually not glancing at the chat for this stream. Probably not until the end. I will catch back up on it. Just to avoid spoilers, shout out to the mods. I'm sure that they have been doing their thing. Appreciate you guys removing any spoilers that do come across. I might try to glance over again, I will. Have we had any severe problems, Nunez or Ascension? I see you guys when I first glanced at the chat. Any of the mods with people posting spoilers? If not, then I might try to glance a little bit more often. We're about to crack the top 50. We got through 50 already. We're going to keep going. Trying our best to avoid spoilers and do what we can. Got to get my stretches in and get all hydrated. Been good for the most part. Cool. Thank you, Stefan. Appreciate it. All right. In that case, I appreciate that a ton. I will keep the chat open in a smaller window then and try to look over when I can. We're going to keep moving on, though, into the top 50. Are we ready? Let's do it. Maybe I should say something for the halfway point for the video. We've already made it halfway, and there's some very influential albums and even personal favorites of mine that I'm not really expecting to necessarily show up, but at the same time, there's been a few surprises, a few curveballs from the Apple Music crew. So we'll see if they come up with inflammatory moments that are going to make me start punching the air, or if I'm actually going to swallow the pill without problem. Right on, guys. I appreciate you being cool and not posting spoilers. I was just worried because I saw something near the beginning. I almost read the comment, and I was like, okay, dip out. Top 50 hype. What have we got next? Let's find out. We had Prince, and now we've got Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. Oh, we talked about the Stranger Things impact of reintroducing Metallica to a We talked about the Stranger Things impact of introducing Metallica to a new generation. Hounds of Love, Kate Bush. It's happening again here at number 50, right at the crescent wave of the halfway point. That's definitely a perfect placement, I think. This album is endlessly fascinating. It's got this almost like sleep paralysis vibe. At least that's what I've gotten from it, being like somebody who discovered the full album later. Nothing else has ever come close to its mix of pop hooks and avant-garde sound sculpting. I do think that it's a bit like a Zen garden in a way. One that can go from like your favorite dream, something that feels warm and nostalgic, to perhaps a bit more terrifying and you wake up in a sweat. Kate's voice is so haunting and ethereal and just dramatic in its own way. It makes an impact even when it's more understated. At 49, we've got the Joshua Tree from U2. Oh boy, U2. That's certainly one of the bands of all time. And listen, the Joshua Tree, yes, I do like some of their albums. Do I love their albums? Not really, but that could just be due to me not really thinking that Bono is as great of a vocalist as a lot of people think he is. Their live shows are certainly a spectacle, something to behold, and The Edge, I don't know. He's a good guitarist, a really great guitarist at his own right, not necessarily my thing most of the time. This is probably in my top 3 from them, though. I can see why a lot of people are just fawning over it to such an insane degree still all these years later. This came out, 1990, late 80s? This was a generational leap into global domination, exploring the liberations that come with constraint. You know, I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest, guys. This is the Joshua Tree at number 49, and this is Apple Music. I could have sworn that they would have put Songs of Innocence on here. Yeah, I haven't forgotten. It's been a decade, and that album is still on my old iPhone. How do I get rid of it? I need to follow a YouTube tutorial to get rid of it? That's a problem for me, Zane Lowe. This is another one of those bands like the Smiths, not to that degree where I just feel like just something rising up in me like acid reflux and I just have to get it out of my system. I don't know why I find U2 so revolting at times, because they do have material that I appreciate, but it's generally in contained pockets, like specific albums or eras, and one of those is definitely not anything really post Achtung Baby. Like, what was that, 1991? The albums that have come out since then, it's been a song here, a song there, but really just not anything for me to want to keep coming back to. It just kind of feels like adult contemporary on cruise control. What, you guys don't want that on your phone? Come on, you don't want a free U2 album? Like, at least put the Joshua Tree on there. If you're gonna put an album on people's phones without asking Apple, maybe make it one of their best ones, not an album that people have already forgotten and it's only been a decade. Or else they remember it for the wrong reasons. Well, this is certainly making me curious, that's for sure. Because we had, Hounds of Love is great. Joshua Tree is great in its own right. But, U2, a little hit and miss for me. Scrolling on to 48, Paul's Boutique. Hell yeah, Beastie Boys. Yeah, okay, so I would have, licensed all the classic ones that people ooh and ah over. I think that they're good, but a lot of the time they can get really irritating. That early stuff, especially in more of like the frat rap pack, it just wasn't really fully my thing. But Paul's Boutique is really an immaculate conception when you think about how this record was stitched together. It relied very heavily on sampling, which in their brand of like alternative hip-hop and crossing over into the rock world, but also having roots in rap, they were kind of received well by both genres and both crowds, especially after this, because it was a labor of love, literally manually cutting and stitching tapes together to make up a lot of samples. More minimal rhymes, but the ones that were there were extremely potent. This is their best album. I will die on that hill. I'll die running up that hill, I should say, without an inhaler. The Beasties go Hollywood and upend the entire idea of hip-hop. We decided to put every crazy idea that we had in the record, and it took them a while to do it, too. This came out in 1989. I want to say that they started working on it in like 1986, 1987, and they finally got everything together. Mike D, MCA, King Ad Rock, wow. The primal joys of hedonism, vandalism, and having a beard like a billy goat. Yeah, they definitely changed it up with this one, that's for sure. It's very special, very unique sounding. I'm going to have to will my way through this one. My throat's drier than the Sahara right now. And at number 47... Oh, Jesus Christ. Speaking of being drier than the Sahara, that's Women after Drake's recent outings and recent L's to Kendrick Lamar. Take Care is Drake's best album, okay? I'm going to say that right out of the gate. Is it deserving of this placement? Absolutely not. At number 47 of all time, we've got Drake. I better see Kendrick Lamar in the top 5, or else I quite literally might be going out the window with this one. Jumping out the window with this one. Drake, are we sure that this is the time to be putting Drake on a list like this? I don't know that it is. Let's see what they have to say about it. To be fair, maybe they've given some incredible defense over here. The jury is resting for now. Vulnerably rap singing his way into cultural ubiquity. Those are some really pretty words there, but I don't know how honest and vulnerable this record is. Drake is one of those people that even back in the day, I mean, Headlines is on this album. I do like a lot of the deep cuts as well. Marvin's Room is on this record. There's some good shit in here, and it definitely features, I think, a lot of Drake's best flows, best musical atmospheres, best beat selections. But Take Care is overly long. This is an album that runs on for more than an hour. It's bloated in a way, and it's got an interesting mix of eclectic types of songs. Some, like they say, trying to wear the heart on the sleeve. Some being a little bit more for the club. Some just being straight up hype anthems. I just don't really feel like, I mean, it's 20 songs long. And the motto, oh wow, there's another one that I forgot about. I used to know all the words to that because it played so often. I'm conflicted. I really am. I'm conflicted on Take Care's appearance because it is like a good album. Just even detaching myself from anything that I feel about Drake the person. It's well made, it's well assembled, it was more mature than Thank Me Later, his debut, some of the mixtapes and singles that he had been dropping. It's definitely kind of a care package in a way, in the sense that he took his time with it, he didn't rush that sophomore follow-up. This came out in late 2011, the fall, the autumn season. Oh, October's very own. I guess that's where that came from in the first place. But I'm out here saying OV-ho instead because it just doesn't, I don't think, belong on a top 100 ever. Like top 100 albums ever. So much filler. Yeah. I think it's its best, but like honestly, I wasn't too bothered with Drake in hindsight until like post-Views era. That's when things started getting really annoying. I liked Views at the time, but it didn't age that well, and it had so much like the cycle built up behind that. It was meant to generate hype, and it did that. And there were some good songs on there, but again, Drake albums typically suffer from a lot of bloat. I think the one that came out after Take Care was better about that, a little bit more careful with the standard edition, at least, of Nothing Was the Same. Pound Cake goes hard. There's some great songs. Wu-Tang Forever. See, I can appreciate... I almost said the big D. That's not even... You know what? Nah, I'm not going down that path. I can appreciate Drake in small doses, but it's getting harder and harder to take this man seriously, and Apple Music's list, to be honest, with this appearing at 47 over some of the other legendary hip-hop records we've already long since passed. De La Soul, Tupac, Missy Elliott, really any of those I would rank over Take Care. 46, we have Exodus by Bob Marley and the Wailers. Yeah, this is an album that has stood the test of time. I'm not huge in the kind of reggae fusion. I'm not super well versed, and I'm not a super fan of it by any means. It can get very redundant, but this one succeeds and lives on because it was forward-thinking, because Bob Marley didn't just chain himself to one specific idea or song structure even. It went beyond that. Songs about the tension between the hope that every little thing will be alright and the worry that it won't. It's definitely a balance beam. Kind of think of it like in a courtroom. You've got those two weights going up and down, and I think the track listing does a really solid job. I wouldn't say this is one of my favorite albums or anywhere near it, but I definitely respect this and appreciate it being on here. Do 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 do. Every little thing gonna be alright. At 45, we have some Bjork, Homogenic. This Homogenic? This is an album that I've not listened to. I know, I've still not taken the plunge on Bjork, but this one is an album cover that I have seen so many times. I'm almost getting jump scared by it at this point. If maybe Bjork could become my sleep paralysis demon, that would make this process go a little bit faster, and I'd be like, fine, Bjork, I will cave, I will listen, because I've heard so many good things. It's not even like I'm holding out because I have some sort of vendetta against what I have heard. That's not it at all. In fact, I find so much of this Icelandic natives music to be beautiful based on what I've heard. At times, definitely a bit ice cold in terms of hard to get into, but that's not always a bad thing. The songs that you grow to like don't always stick at first. An influential tapestry of techno-innovation and orchestral soundcraft. Wow, that is a hell of a description there. A tapestry is a description that I do like, though. Techno-innovation, that's not what I would have expected just based on the songs that I have heard from this. That was the first time I was like, oh, there's music that's no genre. That's interesting. That actually might be the hardest sell that I've gotten on it so far. I do like albums and even songs that are hard to pin down in that way. Like, almost frustratingly, in the sense that your mind wants to attach it to something, but it just can't be labeled. At number 44, we have some Stevie Wonder Inner Visions. Yeah, baby, that's right. We got some smoothness from the Wonder Man himself. This is a record that definitely gets funky. It definitely gets tasty with the way that it just rolls off the tongue, you know? The pianos on this record sound incredible. Just the emotive expression from Stevie. It's kind of magical in that way, if you think about it. It's a magical album because it was definitely political, but it was very personal in its own way, but still very pristine and pretty, not too cleaned up, but at the same time, kind of pop friendly in a way that jazz wasn't always that way, especially at that time. Definitely bucked a lot of trends. There were longer songs on that album too. 43, Remain in Light by Talking Heads. I finally picked this up on vinyl. I think that this is an album that took me a while to get into, but it keeps your curiosity. I think the Talking Heads are really good about placing an idea in the back of your head or just leaving something with the listener. Talking Heads' Remain in Light is probably their defining album. It's like that because it's not like it's, 20 tracks. It doesn't need that. It's kind of brief. There's a brevity about it, but it's not in any way neutered in terms of its full force range of ideas. I think that they had this idea of making something avant-garde, danceable, and still attached to the alternative scene as well. A revolutionary reimagination of American punk movement through the lens of African music. The members, I believe, traveled overseas and were very influenced by their producer, Brian Eno, who had traveled around the world, and they wanted to kind of combine the idea of world music with alternative, and they succeeded. What are there, 9 songs on this album? Yeah, 8 songs. 8 songs. They're able to do that much in just 8 songs to make this one of the most important records ever put to tape. I'm realizing that this is one of my nervous tics. I feel like I'm like a baseball coach, like giving signals on the side over here. This is my go-to, apparently, my new one. It used to be. Apologies, guys. My throat is getting super, super dry and tired over here. Last night, I was actually recording for my tier list video until like 3 a.m. And then I woke up and recorded a skit for something else and part of another video. It's going to be a busy weekend, if my voice can hold out for it. because to get myself, there we go. There's a lot going on, okay? We're going to be cutting up this Apple Music Top 100 video. We've got reviews for the new Bring Me the Horizon and 21 Pilots Clancy, both of which I have already heard. I actually got early access to Clancy on Monday, so I've already had some time with it. I'm excited about it. I will definitely talk more about it in a full review. Bring Me the Horizon will probably be an unscripted review on the second channel. The 21 Pilots review, I'm still not entirely sure, but that might be worth main channel. We'll see. And then the tier list, of course. So stay tuned. More on the way. And if you haven't already, go ahead and slap that mother effing like button on the stream for me. And I appreciate you guys hanging out, chilling in the chat, chilling as we go through this list. We're almost to the top 40. We're staying busy like bees this weekend. Definitely got to go on vocal rest. It's just going to be listening, and we probably, honestly, this week we might not be able to do the Sunday night stream, but that's okay, because we'll bounce back the week after. It's Memorial Day weekend. How are they going to how's everybody dumping all this all at once? Apple Music is like, all right, we're doing our list this week. Bring Me the Horizon are like, hey, surprise album. And then we already had Clancy by 21 Pilots, which got delayed a week. So everything just kind of beautifully convened here. We got this. Let's keep going. Onwards towards the top 40. Number 42, Control by Janet Jackson. It's great to see that there's been a resurgence in appreciation and love for Janet, because for the longest time, you could even still argue today, she got blackballed from the industry because of something that was done to her at a Super Bowl by Justin Timberlake. So how does that make any sense? This is an album that really, to be quite honest, it feels extremely danceable in its own way. It feels like light as a feather in places, but can also just grab you by the throat. It feels extremely gripping. At the very least, you have to admit that it's an interesting concept for a record, pulling it all together and making for what they're saying is an enduring artist-producer collaboration, one of the best in pop history. This was the 1980s. This, in a way, was its own brand of cultural reset, because Michael Jackson was doing his own thing with that. Thriller was a huge one of those, and Bad, but you've got Janet Jackson kind of being underrated and in a way forgotten about. But after Michael's passing, it made me more curious to not only dive back into some of his music that I hadn't heard at that time, because I was probably 16 when he passed, but it also made me curious about Janet Jackson and really the entire dynamic, even the Jackson 5. It's a tragic tale for many reasons, that entire family, but Janet Jackson and an album like Control is an enduring legacy. Number 41, Outkast. Let's go. I kind of thought it was going to be Stankonia. I knew we'd be seeing some Outkast, but you know what? We're gonna allow it. I thought maybe even AT-Aliens, but that's cool. That's cool. We will take it. The leap forward that turned Andre 3000 and Big Boy into leaders of the hip-hop avant-garde. That's totally fair. This is an album that saw them cutting their teeth in a way that most rappers, and especially a rap duo, which was kind of still somewhat unheard of at the time, untested, uncharted waters. This record, along with AT-Aliens and Stankonia, and arguably even Speakerboxxx The Love Below, records that came after, continued setting up this wild, unpredictable narrative. And to have somebody like Andre 3000, which was a little bit more on the lighter side, quick on his feet, and then Big Boy just being so menacing and domineering with his rhymes, it was a combination that still to this day, even with duos like Run the Jewels that come close in terms of rap duo greatness, this is just a bar setter, and people continued chasing their tails still for decades to come. Unreal. Really. You love to see the love for Outkast, that is for sure. Outkast's You can't say that anymore. They're not. They were absolutely embraced by the not just the industry, but the fans, more importantly than anything else. Top 40 hype. Top 40 hype. Scrolling to number 40. I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You by Aretha Franklin. This album in particular, I don't know if I'm familiar with. I know that sounds terrible to say, like I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that, but it's not ringing out a bell. I know that Aretha had more... Wow. I gotta retake that. I hate the way I just said her name. That felt like disrespect to a queen right there. It sounded like I said Urethra, and that is fucked. Aretha Franklin, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You at number 40. I don't think that I've actually heard this full record. That sounds terrible to say. I've heard some of her more popular releases. I don't think this was her most commercially successful, but the Queen of Soul gets the R-E-S-P-C-E-C. I can't spell. I'm dyslexic, sorry. The Queen of Soul gets the respect she deserves. And when she made a decision to pursue a career in secular music over gospel, there was blowback. There was pushback to that decision. And people are saying what I love about respect is that it's not just saying, give me respect, it's demanding respect. She was unapologetically the queen. A great start to our top 40, but I have a strong feeling, just this underlying condition, I suppose you could call it, where I can detect some bullshit coming in the near future. This is not it. Illmatic by Nas. Absolutely. There's been some rappers that have compared themselves to Nas recently. Machine Gun Kelly being one of them. And you just hate to see it, because if you actually sit down and listen to Illmatic, there was nothing like this at the time. It was starting to get into that slightly more conscious era of hip-hop in the mid-90s. It was definitely very beat-heavy and in a way simpler. In those times of hip-hop, they weren't overthinking all of these meticulous production techniques and anything like that. It's definitely a brutal, raw listen that captured the life of a young man that was really dealing with real shit. I'm kind of surprised, to be honest, because I feel like you generally see something like this in the top 20. This is making me a little bit nervous. Obviously, I'm stoked that it's on the list at all. If it wasn't, I think that people would be furious. But let's see what we have at number 38, Tapestry by Carole King. Another album that I have not heard, but have heard great things about. A behind-the-scenes legend steps out on her own and launches the 70s singer-songwriter era. So this was, of course, somebody that split off from being in a part of other groups, being like backup singer, I believe. I know some of the history of Carole King more than I'm unfortunately actually familiar with the music itself. 37, Enter the Wu-Tang. 36 Chambers, let's go, Wu-Tang Clan. Wu-Tang forever, as a certain other artist that placed at number 47 on the list said. I'm not surprised that this list is very hip-hop heavy, but it definitely feels like it's dominated probably more than any other genre. A lot of fantastic rap albums, but it's starting to make me wonder about the overall balance of the list. It's starting to get a little bit skewed here, but smooth beats, hard rhymes, the Wu's scene-shaking masterpiece. It's undeniable to argue with the greatness of this album, of another rap group that knew how to pack a punch, more than just a punch. This is more like, we're coming for your neck. One of the best hip-hop albums of the 90s, if not all time, like Apple's saying. That's for sure. Even if it's not your thing, it's still worth taking another glance at, another listen, just to appreciate how, I think, ahead of the time they were in their own way. We talked about NWA cutting their teeth. Well, it kind of paved the way for other rap collectives to start blowing up, like Wu-Tang Clan. Do we dare? At 36, Beyonce. Yeah, I caught a glance. I caught a glance as I was halfway flirting with the scroll. It's the Platinum Edition. Beyonce, I have a hard time seeing this high. I really do. 36, Beyonce self-titled. Graining on that wood, Surfboard at number 36. This is an album that really saw Beyonce, I think, start to take albums much more seriously. It saw her transitioning into more of a phase of trying to be an album artist. I personally just don't know that she ever really nailed it. I have very, very mixed feelings on this album. Lemonade would have been the album that I think made so much more sense to actually make the top 100. I still would have not put it this high. This just feels absurd to me, but I don't know. I'm not a Beyonce fan. Let's see, what is the track listing for this? What's the Platinum Edition difference? So we've got 14 songs on that, and then we have an entire other, oh my God. Platinum Edition, there's like 40 songs on this thing. Nope. I'm just gonna have to take, I'm not drinking the lemonade on this one. I'm taking the pass. Number 35, London Calling by The Clash. A little bit more on track there, that's for sure. I thought this would have come up earlier in the list, but again, I guess it's nice to see some additional appreciation. This is pretty much going to be on any top 100 list that you see, probably ever. Focus, camera. Focus. Do your job. Let me try that again if that was out of focus. Number 35, The Clash, London Calling. This is going to be on pretty much any top 100 list that you see ever, but it's a little higher than I was expecting it to be. Not necessarily a bad thing at all. This was the only album of theirs that I really felt like a strong, pure human connection to, and still do to this day, because we unfortunately all know how it went out with an album like Cut the Crap. There were some good ones before that, but London Calling was really something that just shot for the moon. It kind of tried to lasso the moon, if you will. A boldly experimental double album that was bigger than punk. That's a really good way at summing up a short, sweet statement on London Calling. It's an album by The Clash that saw them at their peak, both artistically and, dare I say, commercially too, before they started losing members and before Joe Strummer got really paranoid with the way that things were being handled in the studio. Granted, they were fucked over by their manager and did not deserve the fallout that they really had, but this was just a peak before the roller coaster really started dipping. At number 34, Public Enemy. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. I have not heard this full album. This is another hip-hop classic from what I remember reading and hearing snippets of back in the day. The heralding of hip-hop's arrival as a radical political art form. So it seems like Apple is going heavy on the idea of like political hip-hop and stuff that influences that. It seems like there's definitely some sense of favoritism in terms of which hip-hop albums are actually getting put on the list versus ones that are not, that maybe don't take that political approach. Not to say that this entirely is, because I haven't heard the full album, but just an observation. I've got homework to do, let's say that. There's so many albums, so little time. That's what I always say. 33, Kid A. Well, there you go. I almost actually put that in the background, instead of Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age, which we probably unfortunately will not see. But this record was such a dense masterpiece that for the longest time I was like, this is so pretentious and obtuse and intentionally trying to just be weird for the sake of it, that it just didn't click. But as stupid as it sounds, it took some life experience to actually get to a point where I didn't want it to disappear completely. Forgive me, for I have sinned. Is it a bit of a curveball that they went with Kid A over OK Computer or In Rainbows? Yes, it definitely is. I probably would have appreciated either of those being the top spot, but how do you follow up a revolutionary album with an even more revolutionary one? Yeah, this album is just not something that's for every mood. This is a very fall and winter album to me, or just kind of that depression blanket if you need something to feel like a friend in your time of need. Starting off with everything in its right place, dude. What a move, though. What a move. Stand Up for Your National Anthem, Morning Bell. There's incredible songs that I don't know. They took a very different route here because this is in no way a guitar album. It's not driven by guitars. It's not driven by a traditional bass. It's very oblique in that way. And it paints this almost depressing canvas that does see slight sunspots kind of floating in from time to time, but it never sticks around for too long. We're moving on to number 32, and we've got Ready to Die by the Notorious B.I.G., an almost ironic title in hindsight, knowing the Biggie did not live too much longer after this. It was notorious that artists like him from the East Coast and then on the West Coast, Tupac, there were feuds back and forth with both the styles of music, the gang culture of the time. There was a lot of violence, and I know that people have almost been wanting that blood, as J. Cole recently said with all of the recent diss tracks flying around, especially between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. But this was a time when shit got extremely serious. Way before social media, the Notorious B.I.G. was somebody that just had this entirely different persona. He started off one way, but evolved immaculately, honestly, with Ready to Die, an album that might be a little higher than I would personally want to see it, but despite me wanting to flip it out for maybe some of the albums, the hip-hop albums that we saw lower, this is absolutely a classic. You had to do it to him, right? Right, Apple Music? We're going to go back at the end just to see how many hip-hop records are on here, because I'm genuinely curious at this point. It feels like that's what we're seeing more than anything else. Scrolling onwards and upwards at 31, Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. Yeah, this is an album with a song you ought to know that is not only iconic and captures teenage rage beautifully, the song was written about, along with maybe a few others on the album, Joey Gladstone, Dave Coulier from Full House fame. I remember hearing, what's the next? Why can't? It's like rain. Isn't it ironic? Hand in your pocket. Was that the first song that I heard? No, it was probably You Ought to Know. Trying to remember, John. Think. It was probably You Ought to Know on the radio. I remember hearing some of the singles from this record for the first time, and I actually checked out the CD from the library in the early 2000s when I was just discovering my own music taste, getting into things. I had heard a couple of the songs Ironic and You Ought to Know, and I was feeling my own sense of empowerment from those just because it felt edgy and different, and the name of the album, Jagged Little Pill, made me want to listen to the album that much more, knowing that I wasn't supposed to or allowed to. And it wasn't necessarily the fully revitalized experience that I was fully hoping for at that time. But as I got a little bit older, as I got into my later teenage years, this album fully clicked. It revealed itself as being that album that could pull off that level of angst, but not make it feel like she's just selling melodrama for the sake of it. It's for the sake of the art, if anything. All right, guys, before we get into the top 30, I'm going to take a quick hydration and restroom break. So chat amongst yourselves. If you haven't already, do me the biggest favor in the world. Hit the like button on the stream. It lets more people know that we're doing this. We're about to move on to the top 30 and I will be back in just a moment. All right, we're back. Another Gatorade bottle chugged. We keep trucking onwards to the top 30. Yeah, I appreciate that as well, Jeff. I do. Yeah, we've definitely seen a better balance, but I will say that it's almost, I don't know. It's almost, well, we'll go back at the end because I am genuinely curious about the hip hop question. Just genre wise, it feels like I've seen more hip hop albums than anything else. But then again, different votes, different taste, different strokes, different folks. And the Strokes were on. I haven't felt entirely outraged yet, which is kind of crazy for a top 100. I mean, there's been some disagreements for sure in albums that I would boot from the list in a heartbeat, like Beyonce and unfortunately, you know, some of the, maybe Drake, maybe Steely Dan. I don't know. There's been some disagreements, but nothing too insane. Shall we continue? Let's do it. It's like rain on a wedding day. At number 30, we move into Billie Eilish. Wow, that is that's an interesting pick. As a fan of Billie Eilish, I just re-listened to this album because she just put out her newest album. And When We All Fall Asleep, where do we go? At number 30, huh? I'm sorry, but what level of crack are we smoking here? I'm sorry, that is just, it's way too young, and it's not that great of an album. I really like this album. I do. I really like some of the albums that I would boot off of this top 100, but this just feels like, I don't know, putting Billy here for the sake of it. If anything, if we're going by an actual album and what feels more like the album, Happier Than Ever would be that. Or give it a few years and maybe I wouldn't have a problem with her newest one, Hit Me Hard and Soft, making the cut. But this is just way too high. Even if this had been at like number 80 or 90, I probably wouldn't have had this level of a visceral reaction to it. But at number 30, let's see how they justify this. Experimental pitch black teen pop. It's pitch black, bro. It's not that dark. Come on. That marked the debut of a new kind of superstar. Yes, it's a dark album. There's tracks on there like Ilo Milo and I Love You and even Goodbye that get super dark with it, for sure. But then you've got like Bad Guy and All the Good Girls Go to Hell, and I just have a hard time feeling like this deserves top 30 placement in a list of the top 100 albums ever made. Like, this is going over Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix. This is going over All Eyes on Me. Tupac, Is This It by The Strokes. I can't accept it. It's just, yeah, you know, looking over, I see that too, Stefan. A cutoff point would definitely be something that would have, I think, helped this list. I mean, I don't know when that would be, though, because this album is 5 years old, but we've seen newer albums than that on the list that maybe, I don't know. It's such a tough call. It really is. But what shouldn't be tough is to say this at number 30? Well, this makes me very fearful of how high they're going to put Queen Taylor Swift. Top 2, top 3, top 5, number 1? Number 1989, who knows? If it's 1989, that would be, I feel like, the most appropriate pick. The one that I would be the happiest with, but we'll see if I remain happier than ever. Again, a very good album. I really like this album. I have a vinyl copy of this album. I own it. I really do. If you don't believe me, go back and watch my review. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really like this album, but an all-timer, I don't know. I don't think so. Not this high. Maybe if they had done like a top 500 like Rolling Stone and put it somewhere in like the 300s or something, but this at number 30 instead of 300. Jesus. 29. We move along and try to get over the Billie Eilish placement with the low-end fear. Wow, let's try that again. At 29, we try to move on past the Billie Eilish placement with A Tribe Called Quest, another classic hip-hop album, The Low End Theory. It's great to see the representation here for, obviously, wow, I didn't mean to do that. Wow, I was gonna say more, but I guess the dark side of the moon just revealed itself. The Dark Side of the Moon is like a musical... The Dark Side of the Moon is like a musical rite of passage, and for anybody who has ever gotten stoned for the first time, I'm sure that you've had a friend or somebody in your life that's in like, oh, we gotta smoke, and then listen to Dark Side of the Moon. I had that experience. I had an old friend that took me to a car wash and put on The Dark Side of the Moon while I was paranoid as hell. So I will tell you that my first experience was not exactly a great one, but I'm so glad that I found something to really come back to here. And obviously, this is a generational album, something that has spoken to so many different people because of how varied and out of pocket so much of the music, even the vocals, the layering on this thing is so psychedelic. It's that to a T, but it's also expressive and immersive way beyond the idea of rock or alternative, of psychedelia, of a dreamlike state, whatever you want to call this album. It's an experience. And while at this point I do have albums of theirs like even The Wall or maybe Animals or Wish You Were Here that I might rank over that, it's hard to argue or deny the importance of Dark Side. You never really forget your first time hearing this album, and that in and of itself is a statement on why this belongs here. I gotta stop drinking so much Gatorade, dude. My voice is giving out on me. And number 27, Led Zeppelin 2 by Led Zeppelin. I actually almost picked this up at the record store like a week ago. And I was like, no, I can't. It was like $30. I was like, I gotta find this. I can find this used somewhere. I'm not going to. Led Zeppelin 2 at number 27. This is their best album, I think, definitely. It's one that has some of their most important songs. Not to say that they didn't get really great with albums like My brain's getting fried, can you tell? All right, take two. Run it from the top. Sorry, gang. The brain is starting to short circuit. At number 27, Led Zeppelin 2 by Led Zeppelin, of course. Who else? Led Zeppelin 2 features some of their most important songs, and while I feel like the argument would be like, where's Led Zeppelin 4? Or, I don't know, even Coda. There's other records of theirs that definitely got way more experimental with their approach, with their recording style, even with Robert Plant's voice and some of the guitar work on the record. This is the one that proved that they were masters of what they did. And regardless of whether or not you like the subject matter or think it hasn't aged well, this is an album that in and of itself, for the time that it was cut at, the late 60s, early 70s, this is an album that took chances and it laid out a different path for the idea of what something in the realm of blues rock would look like in the future. Lucky number 26? Not lucky. Kanye West, My Beautiful, Dark, Twisted Fantasy. So we're obviously clearly trying to separate the art from the artist here. I can generally appreciate that. Kanye has done so many things that I disagree with over the years that it makes it hard to want to come back to his music. That being said, this album is admittedly a 7 out of 10? Nah, this album is a masterpiece in its own right. I haven't had the desire to come back to it. You know, it's kind of hard to really want to consume the art of people who are like going DEFCON 3, their words, not me, on Jewish people. It's the hatred and just the putrid attitude that reeks of Kanye's entitlement and of his genius syndrome, if you will. And that being said, you have to hand it to him. This record and the way that it was woven together is this ominous tapestry with incredible guest features. The production is so detailed, so hypnotic that it's hard to look away or pry your ears off of it. I hope that in time I can come back to this album and appreciate it the way that I used to, because this at number 26, opulent, ambitious, self-aggrandizing, and confessional. It's the most expensive hip-hop record ever made. It's 68 minutes of variety, of intensity, of emotion, and again, of crossover moments that definitely made themselves feel like cultural touchstones. We're about to move into the final leg of the race, the top 25. Thank you guys for hanging out. We've been at this for about 2.5 hours so far, and if you haven't already, do me a huge favor, hit the like button on the stream. It lets more people know that we're live. We're in the final leg of this. Let's cross this up to 175 likes. We're almost at 150 right now. Thank you guys, and I appreciate most of you being chill in the chat. Again, I have not been checking the chat often just to avoid spoilers. Again, shout out to the mods. Thank you guys for removing any of the ones that have popped up. But most of you have been super cool. Thank you. Top 25. Here we come. Strange Ways. Here we come. Hug me. I'm scared. We move on to the number 25 slot. And it's Miles Davis. No need to fear. Kind of Blue. Miles Davis. This is just... The brass on this just the playing, the overall feel of my childhood. It harkens back. My dad had this really old antique Victrola, and one of the records that I believe was for that device, for that machine, I should say, was one of the best jazz records ever made. Something that I had no way of comprehending at the time, but I always had this affinity for the horns and violins, as I would call it as a kid. That's what my mom would always like take videos of me like moving and swaying and really getting into that. It was after I saw the film The Music Man, I believe, that I really started to get more curious about their jazz collection. And listening to some of these records, Miles Davis just really putting so much emotion into something that you can't necessarily describe with words. It has to be experienced. It's a jazz rap milestone that changed the scope and speed of the art form. We're still listening to it today as if it's the most modern jazz record of all time. Totally valid. Honestly, fair. Moving along to number 24, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust in The Spiders from Mars, David Bowie's classic. This is finally getting to some Bowie material. I honestly thought that we might see Black Star, but again, it looks like they're limiting themselves to just one album per artist, which is fine and great, honestly. The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, I don't think is Bowie's best album, but it is his most important, if that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Glam rock as myth-making, subversive performance art. That's an interesting character portrayal that he had all over this record, and to really describe it that way, glam rock, yes, but I feel like it's more than that in a lot of ways. It's definitely something that keeps you on your toes, and I think that it was so bold for the time, and people saw that they wanted to rally behind whatever it was that this man was going to create next, whatever character he might portray, whether it was Ziggy Stardust or something in his latter years where he came into his own and felt more comfortable being expressive as the man David Bowie. 23 Discovery, Daft Punk. Fuck yes. I will absolutely champion in this move. I personally might put it even a little bit higher, but great to see it in the final leg here at number 23. Discovery is absolutely one of the most fun, electronic, danceable house experiences that you could really ever ask for. Daft Punk are unparalleled with their precision and with their commitment to having the robotic vocals combined with something that felt a little bit more human than what we got on, say, Homework. Discovery always feels like a warm hug when you come back to the songs. Just look at the track listing. It starts off with One More Time. Are you kidding me? Digital Love, easily one of my top 25 songs ever created. And I feel like a lot of people would probably agree with that sentiment, but this album doesn't miss. It's constantly on the search for bringing you something fresh, and the way that they expressed and packaged their art in 14 songs without ever repeating themselves or feeling stagnant or redundant is just sheer I lost it. It's just immersive and impressive to an insane degree. How am I doing so far, by the way? I'm trying to express, thoughts on all of this in a way that makes sense and actually ignites a bit of discussion beyond just whoa or wow, But sometimes I get lost in thought and I'm like, where was I going with that? A bunch of underrated tracks on this record as well, like Veritas Quo, Aerodynamics. I don't know. It's hard for me to even say that any of the tracks are super underrated because this album is obviously very well known. But Discovery, I don't know. I felt very ecstatic to finally get my hands on the vinyl when they did the repress like a year or two ago. I'll say that. Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate that. Great descriptions off the dome. I try. I never want to be, I don't know, just like a, damn, that's crazy. You know what I mean? And just like say nothing. Even for the records that I don't know, try to at least give a little bit of a context and summation around the thoughts around it. Aerodynamics is fucking killer, that's for sure. Closing in on the top 20, shall we? Number 22. Oh, no, not the boss. No, I refuse. This. This is an immediate rejection. It's expelling itself back out of my body. It refuses to be swallowed as the actual truth here at number 22. Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen. Look, here's the thing. I can't stand Bruce Springsteen, the artist. The man, no qualms with, no problem, okay? This is not about the man. This is about the boss. This is about the E Street Band. This is about how overrated and overblown I feel like their music is. I can't stand the man's voice, and that is a personal thing that I will take to the grave. So dramatic, John. So dramatic. You don't have to be that dramatic, but here's the thing. I just have never understood the appeal of Springsteen. I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. At number 22 as well, that makes it even harder for me to process. I can't find a connection. Let's move on before I blow a brain gasket. Hey, wow! My favorite Beatles album, possibly. This might be my favorite. It's up there with, like, the White Album. It's a toss-up for me, honestly. Ask me a different week, and I might give you a different answer. But Revolver is that bitch. That's right. It's psychedelia. They took their acid. They took their trip to India, and they come back, and they've got songs like Tomorrow Never Knows. Are you kidding me? It's a ridiculous moment in time that will never be replicated. Songs like Eleanor Rigby are here, and they're able to work in traces of the sitar, a lot of outside instrumentation that proved that the Beatles, the Fab Four themselves, were not going to be pigeonholed with songs like I Want to Hold Your Hand, or even songs like Norwegian Wood. They were growing, and it was very obvious album to album, and for me, this was their creative peak. Revolver's concerns on one of the great, possibly true stories about 1966 Revolver's concerns an exchange between Paul and Bob Dylan. Now, there's an artist I'm surprised we haven't seen yet that I don't have much love for. I love Bob Dylan as a poet, as a lyric writer, as a composer, but in terms of his actual music, I always prefer the covers. Always. Dylan allegedly said to McCartney, "Oh, I get it. You don't want to be cute anymore." No, they didn't. They demand to be taken seriously. And seriously, they were. They're not overrated. They're properly rated. There's never going to be another Beatles. Everyone says that, but it's the God's honest truth. Time to crack open the top 20, starting off with Pet Sounds, personally one of my favorite albums of all time, in the top 100 for me. I'm working on a list of my own top 100 albums, and spoiler alert, it's nowhere near this high, but it is on my list. At number 20, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. This album, we talk about labors of love. This is a labor of insanity almost, and the sessions that followed it up infamously resulted in the unreleased album Smile that was never completed but was released in other forms like Smiley Smile and the Smile Sessions decades later, sometimes I think in the early 2010s. But Pet Sounds was an album that just wouldn't stop reaching. It has songs as familiar as Wouldn't It Be Nice, but it also has ones that are a lot darker and a lot more beautiful and not reminiscent of really anything that they had ever made up to that point in time. God Only Knows and Sloop John B are on this record, as well as the title track Pet Sounds, which definitely gets weird for it. And songs like the title track Pet Sounds that definitely get weird with it, as well as That's Not Me. There's standouts all over this thing. And the harmonies, the vocal stacking, the manipulations they had to go through to actually record this, we can take that for granted in a modern setting, because in a way you could replicate the process of making this album in a much more streamlined digital sense in the modern world, but it would never sound as authentic as Pet Sounds, because this was made with the labor of love behind it. Not a bad start to the top 20, I must say. Excuse me. From Pet Sounds at 20, we move into The Chronic by Dr. Dre at number 19. Okay, let me look over the track list for this one again. You know, I mean, this is a great album. It was never one that, to me, aged as well as some people thought it did. It's a little bit more on the misogynistic side of hip-hop that I like personally. I think that a lot of the songs definitely still hit. I think that Dre, for me, was better as his producer, executive role than maybe he was as the actual rapper himself. He had a lot of great songs, but albums like The Chronic just never really stuck with me the way that they did for probably millions of others, I guess. At 18, we've kiss the ass. Kiss it a little harder. We had to go with the deluxe version, Taylor's version too. We got to make sure that we're only streaming Taylor's version, because we got to make sure that the billionaire becomes the multi-billionaire. No, 1989 is, I think, Taylor's probably, at least the masses might agree, probably her best pop work, if not her best overall. I definitely prefer the original version. That's always what I'm going to be listening to, because the vocals sound different. There's no other way to get around that. 1989, the original, was a younger, more naive, perhaps, Taylor, and you just can't recapture the magic with re-records. That's my hot take on the situation, and I'm gonna move on before I get mad about the fact that this is at number 18. I'm surprised that they didn't bend over backwards a little bit further and say, hey Taylor, we know you like the number 13. Look what we did, we put it in number 13. This is ridiculously high. That is ridiculously high. I just pander harder. Tell me you're pandering without saying it out loud, you know? Number 18, the longer I stare at that number right there, the more I'm feeling like, what? If it had been at number 70 or something, I probably wouldn't have given it too much hell. But 18, and the fact that it's got to be the deluxe Taylor's version. Okay. From that nonsense into number 17, yeah, these definitely belong side by side. And number 18, you've got that, Taylor Swift, and then you've got What's Going On, an album that came out in 1971, one of the most important moments in history, especially for protest music. What's Going On by Marvin Gaye is an incredibly important album, not just musically, but lyrically. It connects a lot of different dots that many artists were not bold enough to do. I watched a documentary about the fact that a lot of people, including Marvin Gaye, had to fight back against their record labels to even have this see the light of day, because they were like, people don't want to listen to this. They're already inundated with war and with segregation and with ideas of racial tensions being at this high point. But he was able to bridge that gap, and he did so with grace. He had his finger on the pulse politically of what was happening in America. That's very much true. That's a quote from Elton John there, and that's absolutely very, very true, because Marvin Gaye wasn't your typical, like, modern, you would think, like, out-of-touch artist that has no idea what the common man is going through, but this is a record that proved that he knew. Even Elvis was singing protest songs, yeah, in the ghetto. My dad would always tackle that one on karaoke. Interesting karaoke go-to. Into the Sweet 16, Blue by Joni Mitchell. Yeah, this belongs here. This definitely belongs here. This is a voice that is so, like, if you put auto-tune or anything on it, it just wouldn't at all be the same. It couldn't really exist the way that it does in being as perfect as it actually is if someone was trying to go for that vibe now, because I just don't feel like it would feel authentic. Load. Blue. Joni Mitchell's Blue, again, that's another early 70s record, and it was something that was so evocative of a different feeling that people, I just don't think had really heard before, and still, it sounds very fresh and so honest and sincere in its reverie. An exploration of love and loss, both intimate and universal. That's why it's stuck around. That's a really good way of saying it's stuck around for this long, since 1971 or 2, whenever it came out. 1970? Was it 1970? Let's look. Blue, Joni Mitchell. 1971. Hey, should have stuck with my gut. What a year. What a year for music. This is an out. Blue, whether you're young or old now, or you got into it in 1971 when it came out, and you're... What am I trying to say here? Whether you just listened to this album for the first time a week ago, or if you heard it for the first time in 1971, it really doesn't matter, because I feel that a sincere message, somebody with an honest performance, and an intimate one at that, is going to transcend time and the idea of it being just for a specific generation. Top 15. Here we go. Here we go, guys. You ready? Buckle up. Thank you, guys. We're over 200 viewers. Appreciate you. If you haven't already, hit the like button on the stream. We're in the final lap right now. We're bringing it home with the top 15. At number 15, it's Adele's 21. One of the highest selling albums of all time. This is a really good album, but in no way should it be this high. 15 for Adele's 21. This album definitely features classic songs. I Set Fire to the Rain, Rolling in the Deep. There's definitely a mystique surrounding Adele, especially at this time. She was this artist coming out of the UK that was not only dominating there, but worldwide. In the US, the songs would not stop topping the Hot 100. The album wouldn't go away. It sold so many copies that it's one of the highest selling albums of all time. And it only came out in, 2011? It was so big, and so many people took it into their lives. I can never live up to that again, and that's fine. That was said, respect. I respect the statement on that. The fact that she's not trying to necessarily replicate that, and she knows that she's never going to hit those heights, but she's been incredibly successful. She's incredibly talented, but there is a generic side to this album that a lot of people don't like to talk about. Some of the production from Dan Wilson and others just isn't that special. And to put this at number 15 above so many other deserving candidates, you have to feel that some of those inclinations for its placement are commercially motivated, whether they're going to admit it at Apple or not. Yeah, I don't even remember all of these songs, and I hadn't been that long since I listened to it, at least based on the names of them. One and Only? At 14, there it is. There it is. I was talking about Bob Dylan. I manifested this, unfortunately. Karma slapping me upside the face. Highway 61 Revisited. Now tell me this. For somebody who, like many, Bob Dylan, his voice is the X factor that makes me just be like, I can't deal with this. I can't get into this. Is this an album that would change my mind? I don't know if it is or not, because Bob Dylan often kind of sings like he's being, I don't know, he's in a fight with an alley cat or something. Dylan goes electric and brings the entire culture with him. So obviously early on, a very folksy blues rock traveler moving into his plugged-in era. I've of course heard songs from this, but not beyond like your Like a Rolling Stones or the title track even, Desolation Row, later famously covered by My Chemical Romance. Prefer their version by a lot. Clown on me all you like, but Bob Dylan, I appreciate you as the lyricist, as the poet, as the inspiration, as the Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Peace Prize winning artist that you are. But as the singer, the primary tool that you're using for us to get into and connect with your music, it just feels like there's a bridge that's been out from the start, and I'm never going to be able to get across. Never been a fan of Bob Dylan. I have an uncle that's obsessed, but, so I was listening from an early age. I never liked it even back then. I'm like, why is this dude singing like he's like getting choked out? Tangled up in blue. Lucky number 13, The Blueprint by Jay-Z. Yeah, wow, that's high. That's high for that. No pun intended with that. Is that a blunt or is that a cigarillo? What do we got? In 2001, he was on top, but he still had a chip on his shoulder. Something to prove. The Blueprint is a classic, but it's kind of surprising that they went with that over, say, the Black Album or some of his other really important releases. I haven't listened to this album in a long time, so it's hard for me to say how well it's aged, but I don't know, it feels a little bit high. Jay's incredibly talented, one of the best MCs ever, even if I'm not his biggest fan, but I don't know. On the track listing for this one, let's see. Yeah, I definitely recognize some of these songs. There's the Eminem feature. No, 99 Problems is not on this record. This, I don't know. This feels really high. You got to get that dirt off your shoulder. Get that. Only a baker's dozen left to go. At number 12, oh, we are doing multiple albums. I guess there's an exception to the rule for Radiohead, and I will allow it. I'm gonna allow it. OK Computer beating out the likes of Kid A to actually get its placement in the top 12. I am a huge fan of this record, but it didn't happen overnight. It's absolutely one of the most important albums to rock music ever because it invited in so much more than just the macho crowd. It wasn't made for them. It was made for the more introspective, deep thinkers that struggled with emotional insecurities and things like depression. And Tom York was able to take his voice, make it an instrument of its own along with his bandmates, and make an album that feels so complete. It's like when you bake something in the oven and you just get it that perfect golden crisp, whatever it is you put it in for, it comes out even better than what you were expecting. Now, you know who we haven't seen yet? Kendrick Lamar. Will there be more than one and they're both in the top 10? Because now they've opened up the fact that it could be, there's more than one artist, appearing twice. There's two Radiohead albums. We haven't seen Kendrick Lamar yet, though. Will we see two K-Dot records in the top 10? We're about to fuck around and find out at lucky number 11. Lucky number 11 is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. You can't go wrong, but they did them just ever so dirty. I mean, slide that into the top 10, my guy. Come on. At number 11, it's great if we're looking at it in the context of a top 100, but this is easily one of the biggest connective tissue records ever assembled. It's a breakup album. It's a scandalous album. It's one that almost saw Fleetwood implode internally, but it came out sounding like the most polished diamond being sold at a luxury jeweler. Even just from the album cover alone, I know you recognize it, but if you're not familiar beyond, say, Dreams going re-viral all over again a few years ago, it proves that melodrama can be so much fun to listen to, and that the scandals, I guess, can be so much fun. Lindsey Buckingham opening us up on Secondhand News, just the fact that we have so many incredibly talented instrumentalists and vocalists trading off Christine McVie, R.I.P. Stevie Nicks. This album is ridiculous. It's constant flamethrowers even when they step back and let things get a little bit slower, like on Gold Dust Woman. Unreal. Couldn't give them the top 10. You just couldn't quite give it to them, could you? Had to take it away. Had to dangle the carrot. All right, so if Rumors is only number 11, what is number 10? Number 10. You know what? I asked for Lemonade. I asked for Lemonade earlier. Instead of, not in addition to, I asked for Lemonade instead of the self-titled Beyonce album. You gotta be shitting me. Lemonade over Rumors? That is ballistic. That is maniacal. I feel personally wronged by this as someone who thinks that Lemonade is Beyonce's best album. But are you seriously telling me that Lemonade goes over Rumors? No. Rumored. Okay, now I'm just curious to see, what is this top 10 gonna be of stuff that places over Rumors that probably should not place over Rumors? You're telling me Lemonade over Rumors and OK Computer? Lemonade is not better than either of those. Not even fucking close. Not even close, dude. If this was in like the 40s or something, fine, on the list and in place of the self-titled album. But as it stands, hell no. Top 10 to Lemonade. Top 10 to Lemonade. That is certainly an interesting move. And barely just above that, it's Nirvana's Nevermind. Huh, okay, so we got a rock album in the top 10. Here we go. Certainly an interesting pairing up to this point as we've entered this part of the list. Nevermind is not their best album at this point in my life, I wouldn't say, but it's their most known. It's the one that was the most important, obviously, for getting their message out to the world. I think that In Utero is the better album. It's close. I love both of these albums dearly, but Nevermind in the top 10 is cool to see because it's some representation for grunge. It's the most obvious pick that you could have made, but, it has its reputation for a reason. It's incredible, and there's not really any skippables on the entire thing. So I get its placement. I do. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't go with In Utero. Just knowing this artsy vibe that they've kind of cultured up kind of conjured up so far. All right, let's see if I can make it. We got this. One like equals one drink. At number 8, Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. Wow. Okay. Yep. I know this album. I don't know it as well as some people do. This was some people's entire personality for over a decade, but this is a very good album. The instrumentation ranges from jazzy to poppy to something that you might hear at a jazz club to something that you might hear in a club somewhere like Rehab. It had that bounce about it. Back to Black was really the final thing that Amy made that felt like a coherent statement before her untimely passing as a member, unfortunately, of the 27 Club. But her blend of brassy retro soul and brash lyrics is inimitable and immortal. And the album definitely deserves its legacy. I will say that, but I don't know about number 8 of all time. Might feel a little bit high. If anything, maybe more like somewhere in the 20s, 30s, 40s. But hey, not my list. Amy, because the biopic about to come out. Yeah, paid placement. No. I heard that was awful, and I refused to watch it. I wasn't going to anyways. Watch the actual thing. Amy made her own biopic. She literally filmed, and they took her stuff and put it into A24's Amy that came out in 2015. Why would you ever watch the Amy Winehouse movie that they made that feels like a soulless cash grab in the year 2024 when you could watch 2015's Amy and get the real, authentic look? That's what I recommend watching. Yeah, it bombed extremely hard, the biopic. You're right, Hector. Do we dare? I'm very nervous because we went from OK Computer, Rumors, then Lemonade, Nevermind, and Back to Black. What could possibly be coming after this run? Good Kid, Mad City. Finally, somebody else agrees maybe that's his best record. Although I wouldn't count him out on appearing higher up in the top 5. We shall see. Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick at number 7. Lucky number 7. This is a masterpiece in every sense of the phrase. It's an all-defining coming-of-age story that saw Kendrick dealing with his vices in a very empathetic way. It's an album that saw storytelling rising to that next level, and he became that torchbearer for a new generation of conscious hip-hop, but still the ability to not just lose the knack for making hooks and having that shine to them. It's an extremely vivid album that never gets old. It's something that I've played through countless times. I was about a year late getting into it, but by the time that I actually laid ears on it, I became a full-blown fan, and then T-Bap comes out, and it's game over. He's my favorite rapper. K-Dot at 7. At number 6, Stevie Wonder. So we do have a couple of artists sneaking in multiple records. Songs in the Key of Life. Interesting that this was the one that placed higher. Personally, yeah, is it up there for me? Absolutely. The most ambitious, adventurous soul album ever made? Yeah, that is likely true as well. Stevie Wonder really set the bar high and paved the way for a lot of the records that we heard in the decades that came out, like the 80s, the 90s, that brand of R&B and soul and funk that had such a vivacious spirit to it that felt fully alive. That's what this album, Songs in the Key of Life, is. It's just, I don't know if I'm versed enough to say if it belongs this high up in the top 10. I don't know. Smoking on top fives, Blonde by Frank Ocean. That feels highly overplaced, a bit overrated, if you ask me. This is an album that I've struggled to get into fully and just have not found it as immersive and as comforting as many others seem to have. At number 5, this is excruciatingly high. This feels like I don't know. Putting this over Good Kid, Mad City, Blonde, it just doesn't sit right in a certain way. Blonde is good. I think even from an objective point of view, most of us can recognize that, and I definitely do. I think it's actually kind of great in its own way, but I personally haven't developed a severe connection to it that makes it feel like a can't-miss album forever. Good Kid definitely has that vibes, but maybe it just comes down to taste. But this being still so somewhat fresh and making it this high, did this come out in 2017, 16? Or am I thinking of a different project? I think it might have been 2016. I will say this for Apple Music in their defense. This has not been an easy to predict list. I have not seen a lot of these moves that they're making coming. It's like I'm trying to play their chess match, but they just keep intentionally throwing off the board. So, for better or worse, I mean, I guess thanks. Thanks for not letting me predict everything from a mile away, I guess. Yeah, this feels like it could have totally been swapped out with Rumors or just bump back some of them. And, I mean, Rumors being top 5, to me, should have been a given. But you do you, Apple. Okay, so just refreshing. So we went from Amy to Kendrick, Stevie Wonder, Frank Ocean, Blonde. At number 4, Prince. Okay, so we already did see Sign of the Times, which I personally think is his best album, but okay, here at number 4, Purple Rain. That is very high up, and it's hard to argue because of how just artistically minded Prince has always been. His commitment to detail is unparalleled. It shows up here. This was, pretty much the soundtrack for a film that he was a part of. Baby, he's a star. He's got an Oscar for Purple Rain. There's no way your work can be more political than doing that because he did it all the way his way. This is Prince's second placement on the list. This one at number 4. The other one, I believe, 51 or something like that. I probably would have switched the two and maybe not put either of them quite this high, but it's Prince, so I'll stop yapping now. Top 3. I'm crossing 3 fingers for this. Abbey Road by the Beatles. Okay, well, while I was very stoked to see Revolver, thinking that would be the only appearance, I thought they were doing only one album per artist, Abbey Road by the Beatles is another one that you're not going to see too many people rolling their eyes at. Is it one of the best albums ever made? Absolutely. Is it deserving of this placement? I personally would have swapped it out, but I have no complaints with this appearing as high as number 3. The Beatles' grand exit is also their ultimate entry point into their universe. That's well said. I do think that this is a good starting point for a Beatles fan, for sure. It wasn't my entry point. That was the early stuff, like the album Help, but still, I can see that. We hardly ever sat down and had nothing. There was always some sort of idea. There was blooming, expressive, emotive ideas all over this thing. And while I could go the rest of my life without hearing Come Together, because I used to work at a place that would play it constantly, there's too many good songs, like Oh Darling, Maxwell Silver Hammer, I Want You, She's So Heavy. That is a two-parter song that runs on for over 7 minutes, which was unheard of back in the 60s, but they pulled it off so smoothly, it's like it doesn't even feel 7.5 minutes. Octopus's Garden, I Want You, Sun King, Here Comes the Sun, Her Majesty. It's ridiculously stacked. You can't get enough of Abbey Road because it never stops giving. Two to go. At number 2, Thriller by Michael Jackson. Okay, there it is. I was wondering, we saw Janet, right? We saw Janet Jackson. I think we all knew that at some point at least, MJ was going to enter the chat. Here he is with his album Thriller, which is perhaps a bit, just ever so slightly overrated in the sense that it's just been so consumed, so discussed, so everywhere for the longest time. It's, of course, an immaculate classic that's almost untouchable in its own right. But number 2, that's an interesting placement for Thriller. I feel like most top 100 lists that I look at definitely have this somewhere in the top 10, so definitely not surprising to me whatsoever. For some reason, I was thinking we would see it more at like 8, 9, or like 10 or something like that. 2 is fine as well. I have nothing negative to say about the record itself, a landmark that did nothing less than redefine the scope and reach of pop music. It's invaluable in its own right. It's hard to argue with that. No one else could perform infectious songs of that quality at that high a level. Nile Rodgers, absolutely. I'll respect the opinion of Nile more than anybody else in that panel of people we saw. We're stalling for number 1. What could it be? And number 1, the number 1 album of all time, Apple Music selection, is Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I've never heard this album. I've never heard this album. Okay. I know that infamously this was like her only album, I believe, ever released, and then that was it. And now she's kind of developed a reputation for kind of being at odds with people liking her music or even showing up to events and stuff. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill at number 1. Okay. How do we feel about that? How do we feel about that at number 1? It's not even loading the album art for it. That's how I feel. I'm still buffering over here. Okay, Good Kid, Mad City. Where is To Pimp a Butterfly? What? There was so much socially conscious hip hop all over this list, and you're not going to include one of the masters of that style, of that flow, one of the most important albums of the 21st century? Not to undermine this record that I have not heard, admittedly, again, but okay, there we go. Number 1, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I've heard Doo-Wop, is that the name of the song? Yeah, I've heard Doo-Wop and maybe a couple of the other singles from it. I think I've heard the one with Mary J. Blige, but no, I've never ever heard this album. So I feel a little awkward right now with this being number 1. Also, just because I'm thinking back to all the albums that I didn't see that thought should have made the cut. And I'm honestly kind of wishing they had limited to 1 album per artist, because they kept that up for like the first 70 picks. And then all of a sudden, oh yeah, we're just going to start doing 2 per artist. Maybe. There was very little in the way of like hard rock or metal representation. There was not a ton of like indie. It was very hip hop heavy, very pop and soul heavy in some ways. There was a nicer balance at certain parts of the list where it kind of did feel like an actual melting pot. In credit where it's due, I think they did a solid enough job. It's always a tough task to assemble a top 100, but there's a lot of WTF moments that clearly had me just jumping out of my seat. Like, how did this decision get made? Was it just the luck of the draw, the luck of the vote? I guess I'm going to have to check out this album because it's number one and I haven't heard it. So we'll have to see what that's all about. But that's kind of strange. I'm very familiar with the name of the album, the artist, and even the album cover, but never heard it. Did anyone take a count on how many hip-hop albums were on the list? Because I do feel like that was the dominating genre. If we could look at the entire thing. There we go. That'll make it a little easier. I didn't want to click that too soon because I knew it was going to reveal a bunch of stuff. All right, so we're going to do a count. 1. Do we count Rage Against the Machine? Chat? What do we think? Ah, shit, I forgot to put on ultra low latency for this one so that we would be more in real time. My bad. I'm debating on if we count that or not. That's how we start this list because I don't know. It's like rap rock, of course, rap metal. I don't know. We count it? I don't think so, personally, but I'll see what you guys say. All right, I'm getting no. Okay, cool. We're on the same page. So we're counting Astroworld, of course. 1. Yeah, early on, there wasn't a ton, but we went through sections where there was a lot. I'm not counting like soul or R&B either. Doggy Style 2, Get Rich or Die Trying 3, Eminem 4, Bad Bunny 5, Missy Elliott 6, NWA 7, De La Soul 8. Is this a hip-hop record? I can't remember. Sorry, I have not heard it. Yes. 9. That puts us at 9. 10 for Tupac. Voodoo, no. Auntie has its moments, but no, I wouldn't call it a hip-hop record. 11. 12 with the Beastie Boys. 13. 14, Outkast. 15, Nas. 16. I don't know. Beyonce? I don't know if that's really a hip-hop album. I think that there's hip-hop moments and some features. Free Sailor? Is that accurate? Can anyone else confirm? 21. Public Enemy. 16. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21? Yeah, I think that's what I got as well. Yeah, like I said, a lot of the records, I'm not actually counting them. I did not count Beyonce, don't worry. A lot of the records have inclinations, or else influences of it, or, hip-hop features, rap features, whatever. Yeah, a pretty disappointing list overall, but not necessarily a horrible one. It's, again, tough to make something like this, but I just feel like there was definitely some hype culture bought in on a lot of these picks. Like Astroworld was one that I would instantly boot, and I'm trying to think of what else I would instantly. I personally would probably kick Lana off the list, but that's just me. Definitely Bad Bunny. Maybe Steely Dan. Was cool to see Kraftwerk. It was. Would kick off the Smiths personally. I don't know this record. Deserved. I would kick off the Velvet Underground as well, but that's just me. Rihanna's definitely feels like it's up way too high, and it's questionable if it belongs here at all. The Joshua Tree, me and you too. I don't know. I do like that album, but I don't love it. But I got respect for it. Definitely kicking that one off. Definitely. If we're going to have two Beyonce albums, one's got to go. I would put Lemonade here. If that was at 36, I would have taken it, and I would have been that. But the self-titled, I'm glad that Lemonade scored higher, but with it just being the placement directly over Rumors, it just, I don't know, man. That hit me hard and hard. The Blueprint felt like it was up pretty high as well, the same as Bob Dylan. Adele was too high. Taylor Swift way too high, if deserving to be on the list at all. Had to put one, though, to appease the Swifties. It's a cult. All right. Well, that was an adventure, guys. That was certainly an adventure. Thank you for taking the adventure with me. Before I head out, any questions, complaints, anything else that I missed earlier on in the stream? I haven't been looking at the chat. I definitely think there's some recency bias in here. That's for sure. I think there was a little bit too much on the more modern side of it than I would have liked to have seen. And some albums that, honestly, whether it be Rihanna or Billie Eilish, just need to age a bit more before I think anyone can really make that call. But this is a list of the top 100 albums ever made from a streaming service that kind of ironically helped kill the album. So make of that what you will. Can I show my shirt? Yeah, absolutely. And got back. The list will be forgotten in a year. Yeah, probably within 6 months, to be honest. No Gorillaz, no Blur, which was a little surprising for sure. Unreal. T-Bap, Disrespect was the worst thing about this list. Yeah, basically no metal. Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah, none of that. Not even. Well, we had Dave Grohl, but no Foo Fighters. We did have Dave Grohl with Nirvana. I'm glad I didn't look at this floating carousel ahead of time, because that definitely would have spoiled a lot of it. We just started here. I was like, Hannah, can you open the page for me and just put it to the right spot? No, there's definitely several artists like Queens of the Stone Age, Depeche Mode. I was surprised, even if I wouldn't have it in my top 100, I was surprised to not see Gorillaz. I just feel like the list was extremely inconsistent, No Pearl Jam, no Red Hot Chili Peppers, there's no... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe at some point they'll do like a genre by genre thing, but I kind of doubt it. Especially given that there's apparently been a lot of blowback to this list from what you guys are telling me. What's the backlash been so far mainly? Has it just been like over placements, or is it over the idea of, I don't know, something being too high or not on the list at all, or snubs, or I don't know. Definitely a noticeable lack of rock, but it's not like it wasn't represented at all. You had everybody from, Alanis to Radiohead to The Strokes to Arctic Monkeys and Metallica making the cut, but it's, what can you really expect from a mainstream publication that's also trying to give itself a pat on the back with the cred? I respect a lot of the artists that put this together and helped as a part of the assembly process and voting, but it came out pretty wonky. I don't think anybody was expecting Fall Out Boy. Personal favorites aside, it's like, this isn't like, somebody's top 100. Like, it's not like my top 100 favorite albums of all time list that I'm working on to put out someday. Because that's very obviously my opinion. This is like an objective list of the top 100 best. So, I wasn't expecting to see any bands like Fall Out Boy or Green Day. I was not expecting Green Day from the start. And what do you know? No Nickelback, shaking my head. Yeah, any list is going to generate controversy, that's for sure. No matter what. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to call it there. My voice is pretty shot, and I am hungry. I'm starving, in fact. So I'm going to go up on vocal rest. I'm going to keep listening to the new 21 Pilots album, Clancy, and the new Bring Me the Horizon album, Next Gen, Posthuman Next Gen, I should say. Be on the lookout for all of this and more very soon. We'll try to get this VOD cut up pretty quickly and get it out in the next day or two for the top 100 albums. So be sure to give that a watch and a like whenever it drops. Thank you for hanging out with me for the past 3.5 hours here on stream. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Trying to think if there's anything else I'm forgetting. We're not going to stream this Sunday. I've already decided. My voice is just not going to be able to handle all that. And it's Memorial Day weekend, so I'm going to enjoy some time with my wife outside of getting these reviews out and a couple of other videos finished. But yeah, a lot of stuff on the horizon. Definitely the most busy John from ARTV's been in a minute in terms of getting back into it. And it does feel good. It feels good overall, even if it's a little overwhelming. All right, guys, I appreciate you. Have yourselves a good rest of your day and a good upcoming, maybe long weekend. I'll see you soon. Peace.